Tonight we travel back to the deserts of 7th century Arabia, a land of ancient trade routes, tribal alliances, and spiritual traditions that had developed over centuries. In this world, a man named Muhammad would emerge from the city of Mecca and become one of the most influential figures in human history. His teachings would inspire a new faith, unite diverse peoples, and lay the foundations for a civilization whose influence would spread across continents. From the quiet valleys of Arabia to the great cities of the Middle East, the story of early Islam is one of faith, perseverance, leadership, and profound cultural change. In this documentary, we will explore the life of the Prophet Muhammad, the origins of Islam, and the events that transformed a regional movement into a global religion followed by billions today. Moving carefully through the historical record, we will examine the people, places, and moments that shaped the earliest years of the Islamic world. So settle in, relax, and join us on a journey through one of history's most remarkable chapters, a story whose impact continues to be felt more than 14 centuries later. As you listen, consider this. How much can the ideas of a single individual change the course of human history, and what allows those ideas to endure long after their originator is gone? More than 1.5 billion souls across the globe today identify as Muslim, a staggering number that represents a significant portion of humanity's spiritual landscape. Yet, for many in Western societies, the foundational figure of this immense faith, the Prophet Muhammad, remains a shadowy or misunderstood presence, often less familiar than figures like Jesus or the Buddha. This historical exploration aims to bridge that knowledge gap, not to advocate for any belief system, but to illuminate the life and profound impact of a man whose teachings reshaped the ancient world and continue to echo powerfully in the modern one. The goal is purely educational, seeking to present the historical and traditional narrative surrounding Muhammad's life with an objective lens, free from any agenda beyond understanding. To truly grasp the world Muhammad entered, one must first visualize the Arabian Peninsula in the 6th century. It was a land of stark contrasts, vast, unforgiving deserts, punctuated by fertile oases, where life clung precariously to trade routes and precious water sources. This was not a unified nation-state as we understand it today, but a mosaic of tribes, each fiercely independent, bound by intricate webs of kinship, loyalty, and often rivalry. Belonging to a tribe was more than just a name, it was one's identity, protection, and source of honor, much like nationality functions in the contemporary world. Within this tribal patchwork, the city of Mecca stood out. It was a vital crossroads for trade, a bustling hub where caravans converged, but more significantly, it housed the Kaaba, a cubic structure revered as a sanctuary and pilgrimage site long before Islam, filled with idols representing various deities worshipped by the polytheistic tribes. The Kaaba was already a sacred space, drawing pilgrims and commerce, making Mecca a cultural and economic nexus in the region. When we speak of figures like Muhammad, whose depictions are sensitive within his faith, it is important to remember that historical accounts and traditions offer rich descriptions that allow for a vivid mental image without resorting to artistic representations. Imagine a man of medium stature, with a broad chest and shoulders, a strong, dignified presence, and a thick, dark beard. His eyes, often described as large and dark, held a profound intensity, and his gait was purposeful, as if he descended a slope even on flat ground. His manner was gentle, yet authoritative, possessing a captivating eloquence that drew people to him. These details, gleaned from centuries of tradition, help us to visualize the man behind the monumental movement. Muhammad's story begins not with divine pronouncements, but with a series of personal tragedies that shaped his early life. He was born in Mecca around 570 CE into the Banu Hashim clan, a respected but not particularly wealthy branch of the powerful Quraysh tribe. His father, Abdullah, died before his birth, leaving his mother, Amina, to raise him. But sorrow struck again when Amina passed away when Muhammad was only 6 years old. He then came under the care of his paternal grandfather, Abd al-Muttalib, who also died just 2 years later. This orphaned childhood, marked by loss and dependence, instilled in him a deep sense of empathy and resilience. He was subsequently raised by his uncle, Abu Talib, who, despite his own modest means, provided Muhammad with protection and guidance. Even in his youth, Muhammad earned a reputation that set him apart. He was known for his exceptional honesty, integrity, and fairness in all his dealings. So profound was this reputation that the Meccans bestowed upon him the honorific title Al-Amin, meaning the trustworthy. This character was not merely a personal trait, it was a public asset, recognized and respected by all. One notable incident that cemented this reputation involved the rebuilding of the Kaaba. When the time came to place the sacred black stone back into its position, a fierce dispute erupted among the tribal leaders, each vying for the honor. The disagreement threatened to spiral into violence until Muhammad, still a young man, was chosen to mediate. His solution was ingenious and diplomatic. He simply suggested that the stone be placed on a cloak, and each tribal elder would lift a corner, collectively carrying it to its place. Muhammad then personally set the stone in its final position, thus averting bloodshed and demonstrating his profound wisdom and ability to foster unity. This act solidified his standing as a peacemaker and a man of unparalleled judgment. Long before any divine calling, his early life was spent as a shepherd and later as a merchant, a common profession in Mecca. He gained valuable experience in trade, traveling with caravans across the Arabian Peninsula, observing different cultures and interacting with diverse peoples. It was during this time that he entered the service of Khadija, a wealthy and respected businesswoman, managing her caravans. Impressed by his honesty, competence, and noble character, Khadija, who was significantly older than Muhammad, proposed marriage to him. Their union was a profound partnership, marked by deep affection, mutual respect, and unwavering support. Khadija became his first and most devoted follower, a pillar of strength and comfort throughout the tumultuous early years of his prophetic mission. The transition from esteemed merchant to prophet was not a gradual evolution, but a sudden, overwhelming experience. Muhammad, in his 40th year, had developed a habit of retreating to a cave on Mount Hira, just outside Mecca, to meditate and reflect, seeking solace from the worldly concerns of the bustling city. It was during one of these solitary vigils, in the month of Ramadan, that the first revelation came. According to Islamic tradition, the Archangel Gabriel appeared to him, commanding him, "Iqra," which means read. Muhammad, terrified and bewildered, replied, "I am not one of those who read." The command was repeated 3 times, each time more insistent, until Gabriel embraced him so tightly that Muhammad felt he would suffocate. And then the angel recited the first verses of the Quran. "Read in the name of your Lord who created man from a clinging substance. Read, and your Lord is the most generous, who taught by the pen, taught man that which he knew not." Muhammad returned home in a state of profound shock and fear, trembling and uncertain of what had transpired. He recounted the experience to Khadija, who immediately comforted him and affirmed his experience, assuring him that such a pure soul could only be touched by good. She took him to her cousin, Waraka ibn Nawfal, a Christian scholar, who, upon hearing Muhammad's account, recognized the signs of prophethood, declaring that this was the same angel who had appeared to Moses. This moment was the genesis of Islam, marking Muhammad's transformation from a respected community leader to the messenger of God. The revelations continued over the next 23 years, sometimes as direct speech from Gabriel, other times as profound insights and inspirations that descended upon Muhammad. Initially, he shared these messages only with his closest circle, Khadija, his cousin Ali, his adopted son Zayd, and his close friend Abu Bakr. The early message was simple yet revolutionary for polytheistic Mecca. There is only one God, Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. It called for submission to this one God, emphasizing justice, compassion, and care for the poor and vulnerable. This message, however, challenged the established social and religious order of Mecca, particularly the vested interests of the Quraysh, who profited from the idol worship at the Kaaba. Another pivotal event in Muhammad's prophetic journey, according to tradition, was the night journey and ascension, known as the Isra and Miraj. This miraculous event supposedly occurred around 621 CE, a period of immense difficulty and persecution for the nascent Muslim community. It is recounted that Muhammad was miraculously transported from Mecca to Jerusalem, to the farthest mosque, Al-Aqsa, where he led all the prophets in prayer. From there he ascended through the heavens, encountering various prophets like Moses, Jesus, and Abraham, and ultimately stood before God. During this celestial journey, the 5 daily prayers, which form a cornerstone of Islamic practice, were instituted. This narrative not only reinforced Muhammad's status as the final prophet in a lineage stretching back to Adam, but also provided a profound spiritual anchor for the beleaguered Muslim community, demonstrating God's direct support and guidance during their trials. It connected Islam to the earlier Abrahamic traditions, positioning Muhammad not as an innovator, but as the restorer of the primordial monotheistic faith. Emerging from the profound solitude of the night journey and ascension, Muhammad returned to Mecca carrying a message whose implications would quietly, yet inexorably, ripple through the social fabric of his city. The earliest days of this mission did not announce themselves with grand public declarations or mass movements. Instead, they unfolded in hushed conversations, intimate gatherings, and the steady, unassuming commitment of a handful of individuals who came to be known as the First Believers. This was a revolution of the heart and mind, one whose power lay not in the sword or the throne, but in the transformative conviction of faith and the radical call for social justice embedded within the message. At the center of this nascent circle stood Khadija, Muhammad's wife and confidante, whose unwavering support was as pivotal as the revelations themselves. A successful and respected merchant in Mecca's bustling commercial world, Khadija was both a source of emotional strength and financial independence for Muhammad. Her belief in his prophetic mission, embracing it before any other, lent it a foundation of trust and dignity in the face of growing skepticism. She is remembered not only as the first person to accept Islam, but as a figure whose courage and wisdom enabled the fledgling community to take its first tentative steps amidst a landscape often hostile to change. Alongside Khadija, other early converts formed the private circle that constituted the heart of the earliest Islamic community. Among them was Ali ibn Abi Talib, Muhammad's young cousin, and later his son-in-law, whose youthful zeal and profound devotion would mark him as a central figure in Islamic history. His acceptance of the message at a tender age reflected the familial bonds that undergirded the first adherents, emphasizing the intimate nature of this early faith community. Ali's close relationship with Muhammad allowed him to absorb the spiritual and ethical dimensions of the message deeply, preparing him for the responsibilities that lay ahead. Zayd ibn Haritha, another prominent member of this intimate group, held a unique place in Muhammad's household. Originally a slave whom Muhammad had freed and adopted, Zayd's inclusion among the earliest believers symbolized the social egalitarianism that Islam espoused from its inception. His transformation from servitude to trusted companion and follower embodied the message's challenge to the rigid hierarchies and social stratifications entrenched in Meccan society. In a world where status was largely inherited and birthright dictated one's place, the message of Islam offered the radical notion that piety and moral character, not lineage or wealth, were the true measures of a person. Equally significant was Abu Bakr, a wealthy merchant and respected elder of the Quraysh tribe, who was among the first outside Muhammad's immediate family to embrace the new faith. Abu Bakr's acceptance lent the burgeoning community a degree of social credibility and protection. His stature and influence among the Meccan elite provided a crucial buffer against the mounting opposition that would soon arise. His friendship with Muhammad was built on mutual respect and shared values, and his early conversion signaled the beginnings of a broader acceptance that would, over time, transcend familial and tribal boundaries. This small private circle met in secrecy, often in the homes of their members or in the more secluded corners of Mecca. Their gatherings were marked by deep reflection, shared readings of the revelations, and discussions of the ethical and spiritual imperatives that the message conveyed. The discretion of these meetings was not merely a matter of prudence but a necessity, as the early Muslims navigated a city where the established order, rooted in tribal pride, economic interests, and religious tradition, viewed their message with suspicion and, increasingly, hostility. What made the message so socially revolutionary was less the theological content, which drew upon familiar Abrahamic themes, and more the ethical and societal vision it articulated. In a society where tribal loyalty dictated justice, and where wealth and birthright secured privilege, Islam's call for the equality of all believers before God was profoundly unsettling. It challenged the deeply ingrained hierarchies by asserting the dignity of the poor, the rights of the marginalized, and the imperative of social responsibility. The message condemned the exploitation of orphans, the oppression of the weak, and the arrogance of the elite, calling instead for compassion, charity, and humility. The quiet nature of this early mission was thus strategic and deeply reflective. Muhammad and his followers understood that the transformation they sought could not be rushed by force or public spectacle. Instead, it required patience, moral integrity, and the gradual winning of hearts and minds. This approach also protected the community from premature persecution, allowing it to consolidate internally before confronting the external challenges that would soon arise. In this period, the message of Islam was not yet the sweeping societal force it would become, but a seed planted in the fertile ground of a small devoted circle. Their faith was tested not only by the skepticism and derision of those around them, but also by the profound personal sacrifices entailed in embracing a path that diverged so sharply from the prevailing norms. To be among the first believers was to choose a life marked by social alienation, economic hardship, and the constant threat of ostracism. Yet, within this private circle, there was also hope and a profound sense of purpose. The message was a call to renewal, an invitation to build a community founded on justice, mercy, and spiritual awakening. It offered a vision of a world where bonds of kinship and privilege could be transcended by the shared commitment to faith and righteousness. As the first believers gathered quietly in the shadow of the Kaaba, they laid the groundwork for a revolution that would, in time, reshape not only Mecca but the entire Arabian Peninsula and beyond. Their story is a testament to the power of conviction and the enduring strength of ideas born in humility and silence, destined to echo through the ages. The quiet beginnings of a new faith, nurtured in the small, intimate circles of family and friends, could not remain hidden indefinitely. According to Islamic tradition, after a period of private reflection and selective teaching, the Prophet Muhammad received a divine command to proclaim the message openly, to call all of Mecca to embrace the oneness of God, to abandon idolatry, and to live with justice and compassion. This marked a decisive turning point, transforming the nascent movement from a whispered secret into a public challenge to the established order. The setting for this bold proclamation was the rugged hill of Safa, one of the 7 hills surrounding the city of Mecca. Here, near the Kaaba itself, Muhammad summoned his fellow Quraysh, standing before them in the open air, his voice carrying across the crowd gathered below. The choice of location was no accident. Safa was a place familiar to every Meccan, a vantage point from which the city's spiritual and commercial heart could be seen. It was a public stage where the old gods had long held sway, now to be confronted by a message that questioned their very existence. Muhammad's call was simple yet profound. Worship God alone, reject idolatry, and live righteously. He urged his people to abandon the ancestral idols that had for generations filled the Kaaba and to embrace a vision of ethical monotheism. This was a radical departure from the religious status quo, which had long been intertwined with Mecca's identity and prosperity. The pilgrims who came from distant tribes to venerate their idols also fueled the city's wealth and influence, making the new message not only a spiritual threat, but an economic and social one as well. The immediate reaction was swift and severe. Among the most vehement opponents was Abu Lahab, the Prophet's own uncle, whose name would be forever remembered in Islamic tradition as a symbol of stubborn opposition. Abu Lahab's hostility was not merely personal, it reflected the broader anxieties of the Quraysh elite, who perceived in Muhammad's preaching an existential threat to their privileges and traditions. To Abu Lahab and his allies, the rejection of idolatry was a rejection of their ancestors, their authority, and the intricate social fabric that maintained their dominance. The Quraysh, a powerful tribe controlling Mecca's political and economic life, confronted the challenge with a mixture of ridicule, intimidation, and outright persecution. They feared that the new faith would unravel the delicate balance that had kept the city prosperous and united. The Kaaba, a sanctuary to diverse tribal deities, was not merely a religious site but a symbol of Mecca's status as a spiritual center and a magnet for trade caravans. If Muhammad's message succeeded, it would dismantle the very foundation of their influence. This resistance manifested in many forms. The early Muslims, once protected by kinship ties and the discretion of close companions, now found themselves ostracized, harassed, and sometimes violently attacked. The social boycott imposed by the Quraysh sought to isolate the believers economically and socially, aiming to force them into submission or abandonment of their faith. Yet, despite these hardships, the community around Muhammad grew steadily, buoyed by the conviction that they were part of a divine mission. The challenge to Quraysh was not solely religious, it was deeply intertwined with questions of identity, power, and survival. Mecca's religious landscape had long been a mosaic of polytheistic beliefs, with the Kaaba housing hundreds of idols representing gods and goddesses revered by the Arabian tribes. These deities were more than spiritual figures, they were symbols of tribal pride and protection, linked to the intricate alliances and rivalries that shaped Arabian society. To call for their rejection was to call for a profound transformation of Arabian life itself. Despite the hostility, Muhammad's public preaching marked a crucial moment of conviction and courage. His voice, raised against the tide of tradition and power, signaled the emergence of a new social and spiritual order. It was an act of defiance that reverberated through the streets of Mecca, challenging not only the deities of stone but the very hierarchies that had governed Arabian life for generations. In this period of early confrontation, the dynamics between the Prophet and the Quraysh reveal much about the transformative nature of Islam's beginnings. It was not merely a theological dispute but a clash of worldviews, old tribal customs and polytheistic rites versus a unifying monotheism that emphasized moral responsibility and social justice. The tension encapsulated the struggles of a society on the brink of profound change, where faith became inseparable from politics, economics, and identity. As the opposition intensified, so too did the resolve of the believers. The tensions that unfolded in the shadows of the Kaaba would continue to shape the trajectory of Islam's rise, setting the stage for further trials, migrations, and ultimately the expansion of a community that, against all odds, would go on to reshape the Arabian Peninsula and the wider world. As the message of Islam began to ripple through the streets and marketplaces of Mecca, it encountered a formidable opposition born not merely from disagreement, but from profound anxiety. The early converts, drawn by the call to monotheism and social justice, found themselves thrust into a crucible of mockery, exclusion, and brutal persecution that would test the very limits of their faith and resolve. Mecca in this period was not only a commercial hub, but also a deeply tribal society, where social cohesion depended on shared customs, reciprocal hospitality, and above all, loyalty to one's clan. To reject the polytheistic traditions embedded in the city's religious and economic life was to threaten the fragile equilibrium of power and prestige. Those who embraced Muhammad's teachings were seen as upending this order, casting doubt on the authority of the Quraysh elite who had long presided over the Kaaba and its myriad idols. The response was swift and merciless. Among the earliest converts were individuals from the most vulnerable strata of Meccan society: slaves, the poor, and those without strong tribal protection. Their acceptance of Islam marked them for particular scrutiny and suffering. One such figure was Bilal ibn Rabah, an Ethiopian slave whose unwavering declaration of faith made him a symbol of endurance. According to tradition, Bilal's master subjected him to relentless torture, laying heavy stones upon his chest in the merciless desert heat in an effort to force him to renounce his belief. Yet, through every agonizing trial, Bilal's spirit remained unbroken, his voice rising in prayer and proclamation, embodying the profound conviction that faith could transcend even the most harrowing pain. The persecution was not only physical but psychological, shaped by a calculated campaign of humiliation and social ostracism. Converts were derided in the public squares, their loyalty questioned, their reputations sullied. Families were torn apart as kinship ties, the bedrock of Arabian society, were strained by allegiance to this new faith. Those with tribal affiliations could sometimes find a protective shield, as the sanctity of clan honor deterred outright violence. Muhammad's own uncle, Abu Talib, though not a Muslim himself, provided steadfast protection to his nephew and the nascent community, leveraging the respect commanded by their family to shield them from the worst excesses of Quraysh hostility. Yet even this protection had its limits in a climate growing increasingly hostile. Among the most poignant and tragic stories from this period are those of Sumayya bint Khayat and her husband Yasir, regarded as the first martyrs in Islam. Both were slaves, powerless in the social hierarchy, and their embrace of the new faith made them targets for ruthless cruelty. Sumayya's steadfastness in the face of relentless torture is remembered as a testament to the indomitable strength found within the earliest believers. Her murder, at the hands of Abu Jahl, a leading opponent of Muhammad and a figure synonymous with the violent resistance to Islam, marked a dark turning point, illustrating the lethal stakes of religious defiance in Mecca. The persecution extended beyond mere physical torment. It sought to erode the very foundations of community and identity. Converts were boycotted, denied trade, and subjected to economic sanctions designed to isolate and starve the fledgling Muslim community into submission. Their homes became places of sorrow and resilience, where they gathered in secret to support one another, to share the revelations that Muhammad received, and to nurture a faith that only deepened under pressure. Muhammad's response to this onslaught was marked by remarkable patience and perseverance. Rather than retaliate or seek political power through force, He chose a path rooted in steadfastness, compassion, and unwavering commitment to his mission. According to Islamic tradition, he continued to preach with gentle eloquence, calling on his followers to endure with patience and trust in divine justice. His leadership during this period was not only spiritual but deeply personal, as he bore witness to the suffering of his closest companions and faced the weight of their collective trials. This era of persecution in Mecca reveals the profound challenges inherent in introducing a transformative vision into a society deeply attached to its traditions and power structures. It was a time when faith was forged in the crucible of adversity, and where the courage of a few would lay the groundwork for a movement that transcended tribal boundaries and social hierarchies. The stories of Bilal, Sumaya, Yasir, and countless others serve as enduring reminders of the human cost of spiritual conviction. As the fledgling Muslim community in Mecca endured mounting persecution, a decisive chapter unfolded, one that would take some of its earliest adherents beyond the familiar deserts of Arabia to the distant shores of the African kingdom of Abyssinia. This was not merely a geographical journey, it was a profound quest for justice, sanctuary, and the freedom to practice their faith without fear. The migration to Abyssinia, or modern-day Ethiopia and Eritrea, marks a pivotal moment in Islamic history, revealing the interconnectedness of the ancient world and the enduring human pursuit of dignity amid adversity. The seeds of this migration were sown in the relentless opposition that the early Muslims faced within Mecca. The Quraysh elite, guardians of the city's social and religious order, viewed the monotheistic message of Muhammad as a direct threat to their power, wealth, and cultural identity. Converts, particularly those from marginalized backgrounds such as slaves and the poor, were singled out for brutal treatment. The stories of figures like Bilal ibn Rabah, the Abyssinian slave who endured torture for his faith, exemplify the cruelty inflicted upon those who dared to embrace the new creed. This environment of hostility made it clear that survival within Mecca would require more than steadfastness. It demanded escape. In the year approximately 615 CE, the first group of Muslims, around a dozen men and several women, embarked on a perilous voyage across the Red Sea to seek refuge in Abyssinia. This kingdom, ruled by a Christian monarch known as Al-Najasi, stood as a beacon of hope. Located across the narrow straits from the Arabian Peninsula, Abyssinia was distinguished not only by its mountainous terrain and ancient Christian heritage, but also by its reputation for justice and tolerance. Unlike the tribal confederations of Arabia, its governance was centralized under a ruler who upheld the principles of fairness, making it a sanctuary for those fleeing persecution. The arrival of the Muslim emigrants in the royal court of Al-Najashi set in motion a remarkable encounter. According to Islamic tradition, the Quraysh, alarmed by the loss of their members and eager to maintain their hegemony, dispatched envoys to Abyssinia to demand the return of the refugees. They accused the Muslims of spreading falsehoods and causing unrest. In response, Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, a cousin of Muhammad and a gifted orator, rose to speak before the king and his court. His speech, eloquent and measured, articulated the core tenets of Islam with clarity and sincerity. Ja'far began by recounting the revelations received by Muhammad, the oneness of God, the call to worship him alone, and the ethical imperatives to care for orphans, the needy, and those who suffer injustice. He emphasized that their migration was not an act of rebellion, but a desperate search for safety and the right to live in accordance with their conscience. He spoke of Jesus as a revered prophet, connecting the new faith to the Christian tradition familiar to the Abyssinian court. This respectful dialogue resonated deeply with Al-Najashi, who, moved by the sincerity of the Muslims and their peaceful intentions, granted them protection. It is said that he even performed a prayer alongside them, a gesture symbolizing his solidarity and approval. This first migration, while modest in number, was a profound affirmation of the universal values that transcended religious and cultural divides. It demonstrated the capacity of early Islam to engage with other faiths in a spirit of mutual respect and dialogue. The refuge offered by Al-Najashi was a tangible expression of justice, an acknowledgement that the right to seek asylum in the face of oppression is a human imperative, recognized even in the complex tapestry of 7th century geopolitics. The success of this initial exodus emboldened a second, larger migration to Abyssinia. Over the subsequent years, approximately 100 or more Muslims, including men of notable status and families, undertook the journey. They established a small but vibrant community within the kingdom, maintaining their religious practices and cultural identity while living in relative peace. This diaspora in Abyssinia became a vital lifeline for the early Muslim movement, preserving its continuity and morale during a period when prospects in Mecca remained bleak. Yet, the story of the migration to Abyssinia must be understood within a broader historical and spiritual context. It reflected the dynamic interplay between emerging Islam and the established religious and political orders of the time. The Christian kingdom of Abyssinia, itself heir to a long tradition dating back to the Aksumite Empire, embodied an alternative model of governance, one where faith and justice coexisted under a ruler who exercised compassion and discernment. For the Muslims, this experience was not only a physical refuge, but also a profound lesson in the possibilities of coexistence and the ethical responsibilities of leadership. Back in Mecca, the absence of these early emigrants did little to soften the hostility of the Quraysh. The persecution intensified, and the Muslim community found itself increasingly marginalized and vulnerable. Yet, the knowledge that a safe haven existed across the sea offered a measure of hope and a tangible connection to a broader human family. It affirmed that the message of Islam was not confined to the desert plains of Arabia, but was part of a larger dialogue among civilizations. The chapter of the Abyssinian migration closes with a reflection on the enduring significance of this journey. It was a testament to the courage of individuals who, in the face of injustice, chose to seek refuge rather than abandon their principles. It was an early example of what would become a global faith's engagement with diverse peoples and cultures, and it was a moment when the values of compassion, justice, and mutual respect transcended the boundaries of tribe, language, and religion. As the nascent Muslim community in Mecca steadily grew in number and conviction, so too did the opposition from the city's powerful elite deepen, culminating in one of the most harrowing episodes in the early history of Islam: the boycott of the Banu Hashim clan. This event, etched profoundly into Islamic tradition as a period of severe trial and resilience, unfolded against the backdrop of a fiercely tribal society where honor and survival were bound to kinship and alliance. The catalyst for this unprecedented measure was the staunch support that Muhammad's immediate family and closest followers offered him, especially given their relatively modest standing within the Quraysh hierarchy. The Banu Hashim, Muhammad's own clan, had long been entrusted with the custodianship of the Kaaba and enjoyed a respected status. Yet they were not immune to the economic and social pressures wielded by rival Quraysh factions determined to stem the tide of the Prophet's message. In an effort to isolate Muhammad and dissuade others from embracing his teachings, the Quraysh leaders imposed a strict and prolonged boycott, barring all trade and social interaction with the Banu Hashim and their allies. This embargo was comprehensive, cutting off access to food, marriage alliances, and basic necessities, effectively confining the clan to a state of siege within the arid valley of Mecca. For approximately 3 years, the Banu Hashim endured this calculated hardship. The valley, already a challenging environment with its limited resources, became a crucible of suffering. Hunger gnawed relentlessly, ailments went untreated, and the social fabric of the clan was stretched to its limits. Yet, within this crucible, the bonds of loyalty and faith were simultaneously forged stronger. Muhammad's unwavering resolve and the steadfast support of his family underscored the profound commitment to a vision that transcended immediate survival, a vision of spiritual renewal and social justice that challenged the entrenched order. The boycott, intended as a tool of suppression, ironically illuminated the strength and unity of the Muslim community in its infancy. This period of intense deprivation and isolation came to an end with the intervention of key figures within Mecca who recognized that the boycott was not only failing in its aims, but also threatening the stability of the city itself. The hardship imposed on the Banu Hashim had begun to evoke sympathy even among some of their former adversaries. Gradually, under pressure and negotiation, the Quraysh leaders lifted the embargo, and the clan was allowed to resume normal social and economic relations. Yet, the scars left by this ordeal were deep and enduring, marking a turning point in the struggle between Muhammad and the Quraysh establishment. The year following the boycott's conclusion would come to be known in Islamic history as the Year of Sorrow, Aam al-Hazn, a time marked by profound personal loss for Muhammad and a test of his resilience as a leader and prophet. Two of the most pivotal figures in his life, his beloved wife Khadija and his protective uncle Abu Talib, both passed away within months of each other. Khadija, a wealthy and influential merchant, had been Muhammad's confidant, supporter, and the first to embrace his prophetic mission. Her encouragement and unwavering faith had provided him with emotional and material strength during the earliest, most vulnerable years of his calling. Abu Talib, though he never converted to Islam, was a formidable protector whose clan's support had shielded Muhammad from the worst excesses of Quraysh hostility. Their deaths left Muhammad bereft of his closest allies and exposed to intensified opposition. The loss of Khadija meant the removal of the emotional anchor and the financial patron who had sustained the early Muslim community. Abu Talib's passing signaled a shift in the delicate balance of tribal protection, exposing Muhammad to increased threats and diminishing his security within Mecca. The social and political isolation that followed was acute, as the Prophet found himself increasingly vulnerable within a city that had once been his home and community. This period of mourning and solitude was not only a personal tragedy, but also a critical juncture in the mission of Islam, one that would redefine the Prophet's path forward. Yet, amid the sorrow, Muhammad's resolve did not waver. According to Islamic tradition, it was during this time that the revelations took on a new intensity, affirming the prophetic mission and preparing the community for the trials that lay ahead. The Year of Sorrow thus stands as a testament to the intertwining of personal grief and spiritual fortitude, a moment when faith was both tested and deepened in the crucible of human experience. Politically, the consequences of these losses reshaped the landscape of Mecca's religious dynamics. Without Abu Talib's protection, the Quraysh intensified their efforts to undermine Muhammad, seeking to isolate him further and discredit his message. The boycott's end had not brought peace, but rather a new phase of confrontation, one that would ultimately lead to the Prophet's decision to seek allies beyond Mecca's borders. This strategic recalibration sowed the seeds for subsequent events, including the pivotal migration to Medina, where Islam would find fertile ground to flourish. Socially, the boycott and the Year of Sorrow left an indelible mark on the Muslim community, forging a collective identity rooted in endurance and unwavering faith. The shared experience of hardship and loss bonded the early followers, reinforcing their commitment to a cause that transcended individual suffering. It also illustrated the profound challenges faced by a movement that sought to upend existing social hierarchies and religious traditions in a deeply conservative and tribal society. In the relentless unfolding of Muhammad's prophetic mission, there came a moment when the familiar streets of Mecca, once a place of community and commerce, became marked by hostility and rejection. The Year of Sorrow had left the Prophet isolated, bereft of his cherished wife Khadija and the protective presence of his uncle Abu Talib. With the withdrawal of their guardianship, the fierce opposition of the Quraysh tribe intensified, forcing Muhammad to seek refuge beyond the city walls. It was during this time that he turned his hopes toward the nearby town of Taif, nestled in the fertile mountain region roughly 60 miles southeast of Mecca. Taif was a place of cool breezes and blossoming orchards, a stark contrast to the arid plains surrounding Mecca. Its inhabitants belonged primarily to the tribe of Thaqif, a community known for their wealth derived from agriculture and trade, as well as their own entrenched religious customs centered around the idol Alat. Muhammad's journey to Taif was driven by a mixture of strategic necessity and a desire for spiritual solace, a hope that the people there might embrace his message and offer a new sanctuary for his embattled mission. Yet, upon arrival, the welcome was far from what he had wished. The leaders of Thaqif met him not with open hearts, but with suspicion and disdain. Muhammad spoke openly in the marketplace, inviting the people to abandon idolatry and embrace the singular worship of God, but his words were met with ridicule and derision. The town's chieftains refused to offer protection, fearing reprisals from the Quraysh and the disruption of their own religious traditions. As rejection hardened, a crowd was incited against him, and he was driven from the city streets, pelted with stones, and jeered by those who saw in him a threat to their established order. Wounded and bleeding, Muhammad sought shelter in a nearby orchard, where he found momentary refuge beneath the shade of a fruit tree. It was there, in the solitude of pain and isolation, that he made a profound supplication, asking God to appoint helpers if the townspeople would not. His endurance in the face of such cruelty exemplifies a recurring theme in the early Islamic narrative, the intertwining of physical suffering with spiritual fortitude. Despite the harshness of his reception, Muhammad's resolve did not waver. Instead, it deepened, forging a character tempered by hardship and sustained by faith. The journey back to Mecca from Taif was marked by a poignant encounter that would resonate deeply within Islamic memory. According to tradition, an angelic figure appeared to Muhammad during this time, offering comfort and reassurance after his ordeal. This moment of divine consolation would become emblematic of the support believed to be bestowed upon the prophet in times of trial, reinforcing the conviction that his mission, though fraught with adversity, was under the watchful care of God. Not long after this episode, a singular event occurred that occupies a unique place in Islamic theology and collective imagination: the Isra and Miraj, the night journey and ascension. This extraordinary journey, as recounted in Islamic tradition, describes how Muhammad was miraculously transported from the sacred mosque in Mecca to the farthest mosque in Jerusalem, and from there ascended through the heavens to meet with the divine presence itself. This celestial voyage, said to have taken place in a single night, serves both as a spiritual affirmation and a moment of profound consolation amid the trials of earthly existence. The Isra and Miraj hold immense significance not merely as miraculous occurrences, but as deeply symbolic events that underscore themes of perseverance, divine support, and the ultimate triumph of faith. The journey is understood to have offered Muhammad a glimpse into the realities beyond the material world, a reassurance of the justice and mercy of God, and a renewal of his prophetic mission. Within the narrative, the event also establishes the importance of Jerusalem as a sacred locus, linking the emerging Islamic tradition with the broader religious landscape of the region. In contemplating the episodes of Taif and the night journey together, one finds a narrative arc that moves from rejection and suffering to consolation and empowerment. Muhammad's experience in Taif exemplifies the tangible hardships faced by the early Muslim community: hostility from entrenched authorities, physical injury, and social isolation, while the Isra and Miraj symbolize the unseen, spiritual dimension that provides strength and purpose beyond immediate adversity. This duality between the material and the transcendent reflects a profound human truth: that endurance is sustained not solely by external circumstances, but by inner conviction and hope. As the narrative unfolds beyond these episodes, the theme of endurance remains central to understanding the trajectory of early Islam. The community would continue to face persecution, exile, and conflict, but the foundations laid in moments of hardship and consolation became pillars of identity and faith. The Isra and Miraj, commemorated annually in Islamic tradition, serve as a reminder that even in the darkest hours, there is the promise of divine presence and ultimate justice. As the early years of Muhammad's prophetic mission unfolded in Mecca, the opposition he faced from the city's powerful Quraysh elite grew increasingly severe. His message of monotheism challenged deeply rooted social and religious traditions, unsettling the established order and threatening the hegemony of Mecca's ruling families. Yet, beyond the city's walls, a remarkable development was quietly taking shape, one that would alter the course of Islamic history and provide the nascent community of believers with a sanctuary from persecution. This was the emergence of ties between Muhammad and a distant city known as Yathrib, later to be called Medina, a place whose invitation would become a turning point for the early Muslim community. Yathrib lay some 320 kilometers north of Mecca, nestled in the fertile valleys of the Hejaz region. Unlike Mecca's bustling mercantile atmosphere, Yathrib was a mosaic of tribal groups, notably two major Arab tribes, the Aws and the Khazraj, and several Jewish clans who had long settled in the area. This city was not immune to conflict. Centuries-old rivalries between Aws and Khazraj had resulted in cycles of violence and retribution, leaving Yathrib fractured and yearning for peace and stability. It was into this volatile context that Muhammad's message found a receptive audience, one that saw in his call for unity and justice a potential solution to their own discord. The dynamics of Yathrib at this time were complex. The city was a battleground of old vendettas, and its people were weary of the endless cycles of bloodshed. The Aws and Khazraj tribes, once fierce rivals, were searching for a unifying figure who could mediate their conflicts and establish lasting harmony. Muhammad's reputation as a man of integrity and wisdom, known even in Yathrib through trade connections and shared kinship ties, made him a compelling candidate for this role. The Jewish tribes, too, observed these developments with interest, as the prospect of a new order held implications for the city's social and religious landscape. 1 year after the initial pledge, in 622 CE, the second pledge of Aqaba took place. This time, a larger delegation of about 75 men and 2 women journeyed to Mecca to meet Muhammad. The gathering was more solemn and formal, reflecting the deepening commitment of the Yathribites. They swore to protect Muhammad as their leader, to obey him in matters of faith and governance, and to safeguard the nascent Muslim community. This pledge was not merely spiritual, it was a political alliance that carried profound consequences. It signaled the readiness of Yathrib's tribes to embrace Muhammad, not only as a prophet, but as a leader who could restore order and justice to their fractured city. The significance of the second pledge cannot be overstated. It effectively offered Muhammad and his followers a secure refuge from the mounting hostility in Mecca, opening the door to what would become the Hijra, the migration to Medina that marks the beginning of the Islamic calendar. This invitation was both a lifeline and a challenge. It offered sanctuary but demanded leadership. It promised safety but required governance. Muhammad's acceptance of this call set in motion a transformation that would elevate the small community of believers into a vibrant political and social entity. The tribal tensions that had long defined Yathrib did not vanish overnight. The Aws and Khazraj had a history scarred by battles such as the infamous Battle of Bu'ath, where many had fallen in internecine warfare. Yet, the pledges of Aqaba planted the seeds for reconciliation. Under Muhammad's guidance, these tribes would eventually unite under a common cause, forging a new social contract that transcended old divisions. The city's Jewish communities, while maintaining their religious distinctiveness, became part of a broader pluralistic society bound by mutual agreements and shared civic responsibilities. Muhammad's migration to Yathrib in 622 CE marked the beginning of a new chapter in Islamic history, one in which faith and governance became intertwined in unprecedented ways. The city was renamed Medina, the city of the Prophet, reflecting its transformed identity as the cradle of the emerging Islamic polity. Here, Muhammad assumed the roles of spiritual leader, judge, and statesman, crafting a constitution that sought to balance the interests of diverse groups and establish principles of justice, mutual protection, and communal welfare. The pledges of Aqaba, therefore, stand as pivotal moments of alliance and hope amidst a turbulent landscape. They illustrate not only the expansion of Muhammad's mission beyond Mecca, but also the power of faith to bridge divisions and forge new communities. These pledges were acts of courage by the men and women of Yathrib, who risked their lives and reputations to embrace a transformative vision. They also reveal the strategic acumen of Muhammad, who recognized the necessity of political alliance alongside spiritual propagation. As we reflect on these events, we gain insight into the delicate interplay of religion, politics, and social change in 7th century Arabia. The pledges of Aqaba were more than mere agreements. They were the foundation upon which the Islamic community would build its future, navigating the challenges of identity, leadership, and coexistence. In the years that followed, the migration to Medina would usher in a new era, a time of growth, conflict, and consolidation that would ultimately shape the trajectory of Islamic civilization. As the message of Muhammad spread beyond the confines of Mecca, the response of the Quraysh elite grew increasingly hostile, setting the stage for a momentous turning point in Islamic history. The early Muslims, bound by their faith but vulnerable in a society that viewed their monotheistic creed as a direct challenge to established power and tradition, faced mounting persecution. This persecution was not merely social ostracism, it escalated into concerted plots to silence the Prophet himself. The tension reached a crescendo when the leaders of Mecca conspired to assassinate Muhammad, a perilous threat that forced him to make a decisive and fateful departure from his birthplace. According to Islamic tradition, in a profound act of loyalty and courage, Muhammad's cousin and son-in-law, Ali ibn Abi Talib, volunteered to sleep in the Prophet's bed on the night of the planned assassination. This selfless act was intended to deceive the assassins into believing Muhammad remained at home, thereby buying precious time for the Prophet's escape. Ali's willingness to risk his life underscored the extraordinary bonds of faith and kinship that sustained the early Muslim community amidst adversity. Meanwhile, under the cover of darkness, Muhammad slipped away from Mecca, accompanied by his closest confidant and friend, Abu Bakr al-Siddiq. Their flight led them to the Cave of Thor, a humble refuge hidden within the rugged hills south of Mecca. In this narrow cavern, the two men found sanctuary from their relentless pursuers. The cave's shadows concealed them, but the outside world remained fraught with danger. Islamic tradition recounts that during their stay, the enemy searched relentlessly, coming perilously close to discovering their hiding place. Yet, according to accounts passed down through generations, divine intervention manifested in subtle ways. A spider's web woven across the cave's entrance, and a pigeon nesting above it, convinced the searchers that no one could have entered recently. This miraculous preservation allowed Muhammad and Abu Bakr to breathe, to plan, and to prepare for the journey that lay ahead. The companionship of Abu Bakr during this critical juncture was more than mere friendship. It was emblematic of the trust and solidarity that defined the nascent Muslim community. Abu Bakr's unwavering support reflected his stature as one of the Prophet's earliest and most devoted followers, a man whose faith transcended personal risk. Together, they navigated the treacherous desert landscape, moving cautiously toward the city of Yathrib, known later as Medina, where a growing number of tribes had pledged to welcome Muhammad and his followers as leaders and protectors. The migration, or hijra, was not simply a physical relocation, it was a profound turning point that transformed the trajectory of Islam. Leaving behind the familiar streets of Mecca, the sanctuary of the Kaaba, and the community that had become hostile, Muhammad and his followers embarked on a journey that signaled the birth of a sacred society, one founded on the principles of faith, justice, and communal responsibility. The Hijra marked the transition from a persecuted minority struggling for survival to an organized, sovereign community with political and spiritual authority. This moment also redefined the Islamic calendar itself. The event of the migration was so pivotal that it became the starting point for the Islamic lunar calendar, a temporal marker that continues to frame Muslim religious life to this day. The choice of Medina as the new home was strategic and symbolic. Unlike Mecca, Medina was a city of diverse tribes with a history of intertribal conflict, but also a capacity for diplomacy and alliance. Here, Muhammad would not only continue his prophetic mission, but also assume the role of statesman, arbitrator, and unifier. The period following the Hijra saw the gradual establishment of the Ummah, the Muslim community, as a distinct social and political entity. The Constitution of Medina, drafted under Muhammad's guidance, laid down principles of governance, mutual defense, and coexistence among the city's inhabitants, including Muslims, Jews, and other groups. This foundational document set an unprecedented example of pluralism and communal harmony in the early Islamic state, reflecting Muhammad's vision of a society governed by ethical law and shared responsibility. The Hidra's significance extends beyond its immediate historical context. It embodies the resilience of a community under siege, the courage to seek refuge and renewal, and the transformative power of faith to reshape identity and destiny. From the precarious concealment in the Cave of Thor to the bustling streets of Medina, the migration was a journey of survival and hope, a passage from persecution toward the promise of a just and sacred society. The arrival in Medina marked a pivotal transformation for the early Muslim community, a moment when hope and determination converged to shape a new social and spiritual order in the Arabian Peninsula. After the arduous and perilous journey from Mecca, the Prophet Muhammad and his followers first set foot in the outskirts of Quba, a small village just south of what would become Medina. There, in the cool desert air, away from the hostile gaze of their former adversaries, the foundations of a nascent community were laid with both humility and resolve. It was in Quba that the Prophet undertook one of his earliest acts upon arrival: the construction of a mosque, not merely a physical structure but a symbol of unity, faith, and collective purpose. This mosque, established by Muhammad himself, was the first specifically built for Muslim worship, a simple, open-air space made of palm trunks and mud bricks, reflecting the unadorned sincerity of the community's beginnings. Its orientation toward the sacred city of Mecca established a spiritual link, a reminder of continuity even as the community stepped into a new chapter. The mosque quickly became the heart of communal life, a place for prayer, reflection, and consultation, where the lines between the sacred and the social blurred in the pursuit of a just society. From Quba, the migration continued to Medina, a city known at the time as Yathrib. The city was a mosaic of tribal groups, primarily the Aws and Khazraj, two Arab tribes who had long been embroiled in conflicts that had left the city fragmented and weary. Yet, it was these very divisions that made Medina fertile ground for the message of Islam, which preached reconciliation, justice, and the transcendence of tribal animosities through shared faith and mutual responsibility. Upon his arrival in Medina, Muhammad was greeted not merely as a refugee or leader, but as a unifying figure, a bearer of a new covenant that promised to heal old wounds and forge a community bound not by blood alone, but by the principles of faith and brotherhood. Central to this vision was the establishment of an extraordinary social bond known as the Muhajirun Ansar Brotherhood. The Muhajirun, the emigrants from Mecca who had endured persecution and displacement, found in the Ansar, the helpers of Medina, not only shelter and sustenance but a profound fraternal alliance that transcended previous tribal loyalties. This brotherhood, instituted by Muhammad, paired each Muhajir with an Ansar, effectively creating a network of mutual support that redistributed wealth, shared resources, and fostered a spirit of generosity and egalitarianism. In a society where tribal identity and kinship had long dictated status and security, this radical reconfiguration of social bonds was both revolutionary and necessary. It turned Medina into a sanctuary where the persecuted could rebuild their lives, and where a new communal identity could be forged, grounded in the shared commitment to God and to one another. The transformation of Medina was not limited to social reforms and communal solidarity. It also involved the creation of a political and legal framework, unprecedented in its inclusiveness and vision. The Prophet Muhammad, as both spiritual guide and political leader, orchestrated the drafting of what would come to be known as the Constitution of Medina. This document was a pioneering charter that delineated the rights and responsibilities of the city's diverse inhabitants, including Muslims, Jews, and other tribes. It established principles of collective security, dispute resolution, and mutual cooperation, effectively uniting disparate groups into a single ummah or community under the sovereignty of the Prophet. The constitution recognized religious pluralism while insisting on loyalty to the community and cooperation in its defense. It was a groundbreaking attempt to transcend tribal factionalism and create a polity that balanced individual freedoms with communal obligations. By doing so, it laid the institutional groundwork for what would become the first Islamic state, a polity where faith and governance were intertwined in ways previously unseen on the Arabian Peninsula. During this formative period, the mosque in Medina became more than a place of worship. It was the nerve center of the community's social, political, and judicial life. Daily prayers were interspersed with gatherings where disputes were settled, strategies for defense were debated, and teachings were imparted. The call to prayer echoed across the palms and mud brick homes, a rhythmic reminder of the community's shared purpose. The Prophet's residence adjoined the mosque, underscoring the inseparability of his roles as spiritual leader, judge, and statesman. The shift from a persecuted minority to an organized community was not without challenges. The early Muslims faced threats from hostile groups within and beyond Medina's borders, and the security of the fledgling ummah depended on both diplomacy and, when necessary, defense. Yet, it was in this crucible of adversity that the community's cohesion and resilience were tested and strengthened. The collective memory of suffering and exile fostered empathy and solidarity, while the shared commitment to the teachings of Islam provided moral clarity and direction. The significance of Medina's transformation transcends the immediate historical context. It represents a profound experiment in social, political, and religious organization, one that challenged existing norms and demonstrated the possibility of a society built on principles of faith, justice, and communal responsibility. The early Muslim community in Medina was not merely a religious congregation but a dynamic polity that embodied the values and aspirations of its members, setting a precedent for future Islamic governance and society. As we contemplate this chapter of history, it becomes clear that the migration to Medina was more than a physical relocation. It was the genesis of a community that would redefine identity and belonging in the Arabian Peninsula and beyond. The Mosque of Quba and the bustling streets of Medina bore witness to a transformation that fused spiritual devotion with social innovation, creating a model of communal life that continues to inspire millions today. In the centuries that followed, the legacy of this foundational period would resonate throughout the Islamic world, influencing notions of citizenship, governance, and interfaith relations. The principles established in Medina, brotherhood beyond kinship, justice tempered by compassion, and faith expressed through collective responsibility, remain integral to the ethos of Muslim societies worldwide. As the Prophet Muhammad and his followers embarked on their journey from Mecca to the city of Yathrib, soon to be known as Medina, they encountered a vastly different social landscape, one marked by a complex tapestry of tribes, religions, and political interests. This migration, known as the Hijra, was not merely a physical relocation, but a profound turning point in the nascent Muslim community's history, offering an unprecedented opportunity to forge a new social order grounded in principles of justice, mutual respect, and collective responsibility. It was in this fertile soil of necessity and hope that the Constitution of Medina took shape, a pioneering document that would lay the foundation for coexistence among diverse peoples and set a remarkable precedent for intercommunal harmony. 7th century Arabia was characterized by a patchwork of tribes, each fiercely protective of its autonomy and honor. In Medina, the two dominant Arab tribes, the Aws and the Khazraj, had long been embroiled in bitter rivalries, their conflicts threatening the city's stability. Alongside these Arab tribes lived several Jewish clans, each with its own traditions, leadership and economic roles. The arrival of Muhammad and his followers introduced a new dynamic, one that required careful negotiation and visionary leadership to transcend entrenched divisions. The Constitution of Medina, often regarded as one of the earliest written charters in Islamic history, was the product of this delicate balancing act. It was not a document imposed by force or decree, but rather an agreement born of dialogue and mutual recognition, designed to unite the Muslim immigrants from Mecca with the indigenous Medinan tribes into a single ummah, a community bound not solely by blood or ethnicity, but by shared values and commitments. This nascent community was to be a model of pluralism, where Muslims, Jews, and other groups could coexist peacefully while respecting each other's distinct identities and religious practices. At its core, the Constitution established a framework for governance that emphasized justice, mutual defense, and collective responsibility. Each group retained its autonomy in matters of religion and internal affairs, yet all were bound together in a pact of mutual support and protection. The document asserted that the believers in God, Muslims, Jews, and others, were to stand as one community in the face of external threats, pledging to defend Medina collectively should it come under attack. This principle of mutual defense was revolutionary in its inclusivity, breaking with the tribal norms that prioritized kinship above broader civic loyalty. Perhaps most striking was the ethical vision underpinning the Constitution, the concept of brotherhood, ukhuwah, that transcended traditional boundaries of tribe and religion. Muhammad's leadership fostered a sense of solidarity among individuals who might otherwise have viewed each other as rivals or strangers. This brotherhood was not an abstract ideal, but a practical ethic manifested in mutual care, support for the vulnerable, and a commitment to peace. It challenged prevailing social conventions by affirming that loyalty to the Ummah, a community of shared faith and purpose, could supersede even the strongest tribal ties. The Jewish tribes of Medina, while maintaining their religious traditions, were accorded equal status as partners in the pact, reflecting a remarkable degree of religious tolerance for the era. Their inclusion was not merely symbolic, they were entitled to protection and shared in the responsibilities of the community, contributing to its defense and governance. This pluralistic approach was unprecedented in Arabian society, where intertribal and interreligious animosities had often erupted into violence and exclusion. Yet, the Constitution also recognized the realities of political pragmatism. It acknowledged that not all groups in Medina would be part of the pact, distinguishing between those allied to the Ummah and those who were neutral or hostile. This nuanced understanding of alliances and enmities reflected a sophisticated grasp of the complexities inherent in state-building amid a fragmented and volatile environment. The practical consequences of the Constitution's principles soon became evident. Under Muhammad's leadership, Medina transformed from a city fractured by internecine warfare into a cohesive polity capable of defending itself against external threats, including the Quraysh of Mecca, who sought to undermine the Muslim community's survival. The unity forged by the Constitution enabled the Muslims and their allies to withstand sieges and challenges that might otherwise have shattered their fragile alliance. Beyond the immediate military and political advantages, the Constitution of Medina embodied a moral vision that has resonated through the centuries. It affirmed that differences of faith and culture need not be sources of division, but could coexist within a shared framework of justice, mutual respect, and common purpose. This ethos anticipated later Islamic principles regarding pluralism and the rights of minorities, and it has continued to inspire debates on governance, citizenship, and interfaith relations in Muslim societies. In reflecting upon the Constitution of Medina, one is struck by the profound innovation it represented, a deliberate effort to craft a society where loyalty was grounded not solely in blood or tribe, but in an ethical commitment to the common good. It was a blueprint for a polity that embraced diversity as a strength rather than a threat, and it demonstrated that the bonds of faith could serve as a foundation for political legitimacy and social harmony. As we move forward in this exploration of early Islam, the lessons of Medina's constitution remain deeply relevant. In a world still grappling with divisions of religion, ethnicity, and politics, the example set by this pioneering charter challenges us to imagine communities founded on mutual respect and collective responsibility, reminding us of the transformative power of ethical leadership and the enduring human aspiration for unity amidst diversity. In the arid expanse of 7th century Arabia, where survival hinged on the control of water sources and the safe passage of caravans, the city of Mecca thrived as both a commercial hub and a spiritual center. It was here, amid the intersecting routes of desert trade, that the unfolding drama of early Islam would take a decisive turn. The year was 624 CE, and the nascent Muslim community, having endured years of persecution and hardship in Mecca, had recently found refuge in the city of Medina. Yet, despite this newfound sanctuary, the struggle for survival was far from over. The Battle of Badr, a confrontation that would come to embody both the physical and spiritual tenacity of Muhammad's followers, lay just ahead, a battle whose outcome would reverberate far beyond the sands of the Arabian Peninsula. To understand the significance of Badr, one must first appreciate the intricate web of commerce and tribal allegiances that defined the region. The Arabian desert was punctuated by perilous caravan routes, lifelines for the trading economies of Mecca and its rivals. These caravans, laden with goods ranging from spices and textiles to precious metals, were the arteries through which wealth and influence flowed. For the Muslims of Medina, who had been forcibly separated from their ancestral homes and economic bases in Mecca, intercepting a Meccan caravan was not merely an act of war, but a strategic imperative, a means of asserting their presence and securing resources essential for their community's survival. The caravan in question was headed to Mecca from the rich markets of Syria, guarded by a contingent of seasoned Qurayshi warriors. Its success would bolster the power of Mecca's elite, who had long opposed Muhammad's message and the challenge it posed to their social and economic order. For the Muslims, disrupting this caravan was a calculated risk, a bold statement of defiance, and a test of their collective resolve. Muhammad, known for his prudence and strategic acumen, carefully marshaled a force of approximately 300 men, a mix of committed believers and those newly allied, and set out toward the Well of Badr, a key oasis situated along the caravan's route. As the two forces converged near Badr, the stakes could not have been higher. The Muslims were outnumbered, less equipped, and faced a Quraysh army determined to quash what they perceived as a dangerous insurgency. Yet, it was here that the course of Islamic history pivoted dramatically. According to Islamic tradition, the battle was suffused with signs of divine intervention. Angels were said to have fought alongside the Muslim ranks, bolstering their courage and turning the tide against formidable odds. While such accounts are matters of faith, the historical reality is clear. The Muslim victory at Badr was unexpected and decisive, a triumph that elevated their position from a vulnerable minority to a formidable political and military force in the region. The outcome of Badr resonated deeply within the collective memory of the Muslim community. It was not merely a battlefield success, but a spiritual vindication, a demonstration that their cause was righteous and under the protection of a higher power. The victory instilled a profound sense of purpose and unity among the believers, reinforcing the idea that perseverance in the face of adversity was both a test and a testament of faith. Muhammad's leadership was further solidified, his role as both a prophet and a commander affirmed by the tangible fruits of this pivotal encounter. Politically, the Battle of Badr marked a watershed moment. The defeat inflicted upon the Quraysh disrupted the established balance of power, undermining their prestige and control over the trade networks vital to Mecca's prosperity. It also sent a clear message to other tribes and factions throughout Arabia. The Muslims were no longer a mere sect but a rising power capable of challenging the status quo. This shift catalyzed a series of alliances and confrontations that would shape the trajectory of the early Islamic state, moving it from the margins of Arabian society to its center. In the aftermath, the Muslim community faced the complex task of consolidating its gains while navigating the intricate tribal politics of the peninsula. The spoils of war from Badr were distributed according to principles that balanced material needs with ethical considerations, reflecting Muhammad's continuing effort to forge a just and cohesive society. The battle also intensified the enmity of Meccan leaders, setting the stage for further conflicts, yet it simultaneously emboldened the Muslims, who now wielded both spiritual authority and tangible power. The spiritual dimensions of Badr extend beyond its immediate context. Within Islamic tradition, the battle is revered as an emblem of divine justice and the triumph of faith over adversity. It is commemorated annually during the month of Ramadan, its lessons invoked as a source of inspiration for courage, sacrifice, and unwavering commitment to truth. The narrative of Badr thus occupies a foundational place in Islamic consciousness, shaping how generations of believers understand their relationship to God, community, and history. In the wake of the stunning victory at Badr, the Muslim community in Medina found itself both emboldened and imperiled. The Quraysh of Mecca, deeply humiliated by their defeat and intent on reasserting their dominance, began to prepare a formidable counterstrike. This was no mere skirmish, it was a reckoning. The Battle of Uhud, fought on the slopes of a rugged mountain near Medina, would test the resilience, discipline and unity of Muhammad's followers in ways that would leave an indelible mark on Islamic history. The Quraysh, rallying an army of approximately 3,000 men, far exceeding the Muslim force of around 700, marched toward Medina with the explicit goal of revenge. Their ranks included many of the city's elite warriors, eager to avenge the loss at Badr and to crush what they viewed as a dangerous insurgency undermining the established order. The confrontation would not be fought in the open plains but on the challenging terrain surrounding Mount Uhud, a strategic choice that would shape the battle's unfolding. Muhammad, aware of the scale of the threat, positioned his forces with great care. Understanding the value of terrain and the need for vigilance, he deployed a contingent of about 50 archers on a small hill guarding the rear flank. Their orders were clear and strict: hold their position at all costs, prevent any enemy cavalry from encircling the Muslim lines, and maintain the integrity of the defensive posture. This decision, reflecting a blend of tactical foresight and reliance on disciplined obedience, would prove pivotal. As the battle commenced, the Muslims initially gained the upper hand. Their cohesion and fierce determination drove back the Quraysh assault, echoing the momentum of their earlier victory. Yet the tide of war is often mercurial, and the calm that seemed to herald triumph soon gave way to chaos. The archers stationed on the hill, witnessing the Quraysh retreat under relentless pressure, made a fateful choice. Despite explicit orders, many descended from their vantage point to join in the spoils of battle, believing the enemy was decisively defeated. This breach of discipline exposed the Muslim rear to a sudden cavalry charge led by Khalid ibn al-Walid, a tactician whose genius would later reshape the era's battlefields. The Quraysh exploited this vulnerability with devastating effect. The sudden counterattack sowed confusion and panic among the Muslim ranks, fracturing their formation and turning the tide against them. In the ensuing melee, the Muslim forces suffered grievous losses. Among the fallen was Hamza ibn Abdul Muttalib, Muhammad's beloved uncle and a formidable warrior whose death resonated deeply within the community. Known for his unwavering support and courage, Hamza's martyrdom was a profound blow, symbolizing the high cost of the day's reversal. As the dust settled, rumors circulated with alarming speed. Muhammad himself had been killed. This false report, fueled by the chaos and the sight of his supporters falling, threatened to shatter the morale of the surviving Muslims. Yet, according to Islamic tradition, Muhammad's life was spared. Though he bore injuries sustained during the combat, his survival became a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in moments of apparent defeat, divine providence could preserve the mission's continuity. The Battle of Uhud, though a tactical setback, was not merely a military episode but a crucible of spiritual and communal lessons. It underscored the imperative of obedience and unity, the dangers of complacency, and the complexities of leadership amid crisis. Muhammad's response was measured and reflective. He gathered his followers to extract meaning from the ordeal, emphasizing that victory and loss alike were tests from God. The true measure of faith, he taught, lay not only in triumph but in perseverance, humility, and adherence to divine guidance. In the aftermath, the Muslim community grappled with grief and introspection. The battle revealed vulnerabilities, both strategic and moral, that required attention. It also served as a catalyst for reforming internal discipline and reinforcing collective identity. The narrative of Uhud would be etched into Islamic consciousness as a solemn reminder that success demands more than courage. It requires steadfastness, obedience, and resilience in the face of adversity. The Quraysh, though victorious in their immediate objective of avenging Badr, failed to extinguish the burgeoning Islamic movement. Their inability to capitalize fully on Uhud's outcome affirmed the profound transformation underway in Medina. The battle's legacy is thus twofold: a moment of trial and loss that tested the fledgling community, and a source of enduring wisdom that shaped the path forward. As the sands of the Arabian desert continued to shift, so too did the fortunes of Muhammad and his followers. Uhud was not the end, but a vital chapter in a story marked by struggle, faith, and the relentless pursuit of a vision that would transcend the confines of its time and place. In reflecting on Uhud, we glimpse the profound interplay of human agency and divine will. a dynamic that would define the earliest years of Islam and continue to inspire millions across the centuries. In the wake of the Battle of Uhud, the fragile balance of power in the Arabian Peninsula teetered precariously. The Quraysh of Mecca, though bruised and humbled, were far from defeated. Their pride wounded, they sought to marshal a coalition of tribes, an alliance unprecedented in its scale and ambition, to crush the nascent Muslim community in Medina once and for all. This coalition, known in Islamic history as the Confederates or the Ahzab, brought together a formidable array of tribal forces. The Quraysh joined hands with the powerful Banu Ghatafan, the Banu Sulaym, and various other nomadic clans who harbored long-standing enmities against the Muslims. Their combined might posed an existential threat to the city that had become the heart of the Islamic movement. For the inhabitants of Medina, the looming siege was a moment of profound anxiety and uncertainty. The city, though fortified by faith and fierce loyalty, was vulnerable. Medina's population was diverse, comprising the emigrants from Mecca, the Muhajirun, alongside the native Medinan tribes, the Ansar, whose support had been crucial since Muhammad's arrival. Yet, despite their unity, the prospect of facing an overwhelming coalition army encircling their homes was daunting. It was in this crucible of impending peril that Salman al-Farisi, a Persian companion of Muhammad, offered a strategic innovation that would alter the course of the siege, and indeed the very nature of warfare in Arabia. Drawing upon his experience of Persian military tactics, Salman proposed digging a trench around the exposed northern and eastern perimeters of Medina, effectively transforming the city into a fortress surrounded by a barrier impossible for cavalry or infantry to cross with ease. This idea was revolutionary in the Arabian context, where open desert battles and swift raids had been the norm. The trench would neutralize the Confederates' cavalry advantage and force a protracted stalemate, buying precious time and preserving the lives of the defenders. The decision to implement this trench was not without controversy. Some of the Ansar, proud warriors accustomed to direct confrontation, viewed the tactic as unmanly, a sign of weakness or cowardice. Yet Muhammad's leadership, grounded in pragmatism and foresight, prevailed. The trench was dug swiftly, with men, women, and even children laboring side by side under the desert sun, their hands shaping the earth into a protective moat. This collective effort symbolized the community's resilience and unity in the face of overwhelming odds. As the trench took form, the Confederate forces arrived, their numbers swelling to an estimated 10,000 warriors. They encircled Medina, setting up camp on the far side of the trench, their presence a grim reminder of the siege to come. For weeks, the city found itself in a state of siege warfare, a grueling test of endurance rather than open battle. The trench thwarted any direct assault, forcing the Confederates into a frustrating waiting game. Inside Medina, the siege conditions tested the community's spirit and resources. Food supplies dwindled, water became scarce, and the constant tension weighed heavily on every soul. Families huddled in their homes, children whispered prayers, and the sound of digging had given way to the ominous silence of encampments just beyond the trench. The psychological strain of being surrounded, combined with the fear of betrayal or internal dissent, created an atmosphere thick with anxiety. Amid this pressure, Muhammad continued to navigate the complex web of tribal diplomacy. He sought to exploit divisions within the Confederate alliance, reaching out quietly to tribes whose loyalty was tenuous, or driven more by political calculation than genuine enmity. His emissaries worked tirelessly to sow doubt and encourage defections, understanding that the cohesion of this vast coalition was fragile. Indeed, the Confederates were a collection of tribes united by a common enemy rather than shared purpose, and their alliance was susceptible to erosion. The siege dragged on for nearly 3 weeks, a standoff marked by skirmishes, negotiations, and the quiet endurance of Medina's inhabitants. According to Islamic tradition, during this period, the Prophet's prayers and spiritual leadership provided solace and strength to his followers, reinforcing their resolve to withstand the trial. The trench remained intact, a silent sentinel against the Confederates' ambitions. Yet, as the monsoon winds began to shift, so too did the fortunes of the besiegers. Internal disputes, dwindling supplies, and the onset of harsh weather conditions eroded the Confederates' will. The alliance that had seemed so formidable began to fracture. Some tribes, sensing the futility of prolonged siege and the resilience of the Muslims, withdrew quietly in search of more advantageous alliances elsewhere. The Confederates' grand plan unraveled, their siege becoming a costly and fruitless exercise. The failure of the Confederates underscored the limits of tribal alliances based solely on opposition to a common foe. It revealed the strength born of unity, faith, and innovative leadership. For Medina, the siege was more than a military encounter. It was a defining episode that forged the identity of the Muslim community as a resilient and cohesive polity capable of withstanding existential threats. As the dust settled on this pivotal siege, the vision that Muhammad had nurtured, the establishment of a just and united society under the principles of Islam, remained undiminished. The trench was not merely a physical barrier, but a symbol of a community's determination to defend its beliefs, its people, and its future against overwhelming adversity. In the years to come, this episode would echo as a profound lesson in perseverance, strategy, and the power of collective will in the face of siege, both literal and metaphorical. With the dust of the Battle of the Trench still lingering in the air, Medina stood at a crossroads, a city whose future hinged not merely on military survival, but on the delicate weaving of social fabric and political alliances. The challenge before Muhammad was immense: to hold together a community forged from tribes often long at odds, to inspire loyalty among those who came seeking refuge, and to build a society anchored in shared faith yet accommodating diverse traditions and interests. This chapter unfolds the intricate and often fraught internal politics of Medina, revealing how alliance, conflict, and survival shaped its earliest Muslim community. Medina was unlike Mecca in many respects. While Mecca was a mercantile hub dominated by the Quraysh and their vested interests in maintaining the status quo around the Kaaba, Medina was a mosaic of tribes, including the powerful Aws and Khazraj, whose rivalry had sown discord for generations. Into this fractured landscape came Muhammad, whose arrival as a mediator and prophet offered a new axis around which disparate groups might rally. The Hijra, the migration from Mecca to Medina, was not just a physical relocation, but a profound social experiment, an attempt to transcend tribal enmity through a unifying religious and political vision. One of Muhammad's earliest acts upon arrival was the drafting of the Constitution of Medina, a pioneering document that sought to define the rights and responsibilities of all inhabitants, Muslims, Jews, and others alike. This constitution recognized the autonomy of various tribes and religious communities, while establishing a collective agreement to defend the city and uphold justice. It marked a radical departure from the tribal customary law that governed Arabian society, introducing principles of mutual protection and community solidarity unprecedented in the region. Yet, the ideal of unity was constantly tested by the realities of deep-seated rivalries. The Aws and Khazraj, though formerly allied under Islam, continued to harbour mistrust born of past bloodshed. Muhammad's role as an arbiter often required delicate balancing acts, reconciling competing claims and calming tensions that threatened to erupt into violence. His leadership combined spiritual authority with pragmatic politics, and his judgments were respected even by those yet to fully embrace Islam, a testament to his reputation for fairness and wisdom. The Jewish tribes of Medina, Banu Qaynuqa, Banu Nadir, and Banu Qurayza, occupied a critical and complex position within the city. Bound by the Constitution of Medina to the Muslim community, they retained religious and social autonomy, but were expected to contribute to the city's defense and maintain peace. However, historical accounts suggest that relations between Muhammad's followers and these tribes were fraught, complicated by competing economic interests, religious differences, and allegations of political intrigue. Accusations of betrayal and collaboration with Medina's enemies would lead to confrontations that dramatically reshaped the city's demographics and power structures. More dramatically, the fate of Banu Qurayza stands as one of the most poignant and controversial moments in the early Muslim community's history. During the siege of Medina, the very Battle of the Trench that tested the city's survival, this tribe was accused of conspiring with the attacking Confederates. The subsequent judgment, conducted according to the prevailing tribal customs and overseen by an arbitrator from the Aws, resulted in the execution of the tribe's fighting men and the enslavement of women and children. This harsh verdict, while deeply tragic, was seen by the Muslim community as a grave but necessary act to safeguard the nascent polity. It underscored the existential threats faced by Medina and the severe consequences of betrayal in a time of war. Throughout these trials, the question of loyalty remained paramount. The early Muslim community was not homogeneous. It included converts from various tribes, recent migrants from Mecca, and long-standing residents. Each group brought its own expectations, grievances, and visions for the future. Muhammad's leadership style was adaptive, combining spiritual exaltation with political negotiation, offering clemency and opportunity to those who embraced Islam, while maintaining a vigilant stance against those who undermined the community's cohesion. The internal politics of Medina also reflected the evolving role of Islam as both a faith and a social order. The call to prayer echoed through the city's streets not only as a summons to worship, but as a reminder of a shared moral and legal framework. The mosque became a center for community deliberation, education, and dispute resolution. Sermons emphasized themes of brotherhood, justice, and the welfare of the collective, reinforcing the idea that survival depended on unity and mutual support. Yet, the community's fragility was never far from the surface. External threats loomed, and the memory of past betrayals lingered, fostering a climate where suspicion coexisted with hope. The challenge of integrating diverse elements, tribal loyalties, religious minorities, and new converts required continuous effort and occasional harsh decisions. The debates and disputes that arose were not merely political skirmishes, but reflections of a society in transformation, struggling to define itself amid pressures both internal and external. In this crucible, Muhammad's vision of a just society, one in which faith-informed governance and communal solidarity transcended tribal division, gradually took shape. The alliances forged, the conflicts endured, and the compromises made were all part of the arduous process of nation-building in a land where survival was never guaranteed. The story of Medina's communities is thus a story of human complexity, of trust and suspicion, cooperation and conflict, faith and pragmatism. As the years passed, the foundation laid in Medina would prove resilient, enabling the Muslim community not only to endure, but to expand its influence. The lessons learned in this city of alliance, conflict, and survival would resonate throughout Islamic history, shaping the nature of governance, community relations, and the balance between religious ideals and political realities. As the seventh year of the Hijra unfolded, the Muslim community in Medina had grown in numbers, confidence, and influence, yet the shadow of Meccan hostility still loomed large. The scars of earlier confrontations, from the battles of Badr and Uhud to the stalemate of the Trench, were fresh reminders of the tenuous nature of their position. Despite these challenges, the Prophet Muhammad sought to pursue a course that would secure the community's future, not through continued bloodshed, but through strategic engagement, a vision that would soon be tested in an event forever etched in Islamic memory, the journey to Hudaybiyah. In early 628 CE, Muhammad announced his intention to perform the pilgrimage, the Umrah, to the sacred city of Mecca. This act was deeply symbolic, for the pilgrimage was not merely a religious ritual, but a reaffirmation of spiritual ties to the Kaaba, the ancient sanctuary revered by all Arabian tribes. Yet, given the ongoing hostility and the Quraysh's firm control over Mecca, this pilgrimage was fraught with political risk. The decision was bold, reflecting Muhammad's desire to assert the Muslims' right to worship freely in their ancestral city, and to demonstrate that Islam's claim to Arabia was not grounded solely in military might, but in rightful religious legitimacy. Accompanied by 1,000 of his followers, men, women, and children alike, many unarmed or carrying only minimal weapons, the Prophet set out from Medina, their approach cautious yet resolute. The caravan moved with both purpose and a spirit of peace, signaling that their intent was pilgrimage, not conquest. News of their advance spread swiftly through the desert, reaching the ears of the Quraysh, who viewed this move with suspicion and alarm. To them, allowing the Muslims into Mecca risked undermining their authority and the established order, potentially encouraging other tribes to recognize the Muslims' growing stature. Tensions mounted as the two parties met near a water well at a place called Hudaybiyah, just outside the boundaries of Mecca. The Quraysh, led by their chief negotiator Suhail ibn Amr, barred the Muslims from entering the city. What followed was a series of delicate and intense negotiations, revealing both sides' desire to avoid open conflict yet unwillingness to yield their core demands. Muhammad's calm composure and diplomatic skill came to the fore as he engaged in talks that would culminate in a treaty whose terms, at first glance, appeared deeply unfavorable to the Muslims. The Treaty of Hudaybiyah stipulated a 10-year truce between the two parties, a cessation of hostilities that was unprecedented in the ongoing conflict. However, certain clauses struck many followers as humiliating. Most controversially, the Muslims were required to return any Meccan who defected to Medina without permission, while the Quraysh made no reciprocal concession. Furthermore, the Muslims agreed to postpone their pilgrimage to Mecca until the following year, effectively acknowledging the Quraysh's control over the sacred precinct for the immediate future. To the companions who had braved the journey, these conditions seemed like a concession. Some even whispered of defeat, questioning whether their sacrifices had been in vain. Yet Muhammad's unwavering faith and strategic vision reframed the treaty's significance. He reminded his followers that the cessation of hostilities would create a climate of peace conducive to the free propagation of Islam. Indeed, the truce opened avenues for dialogue and alliances previously impossible amid constant warfare. Tribes who had been hesitant to associate openly with the Muslims now found a safer space to pledge allegiance. Drawn by the growing reputation of Muhammad as not only a spiritual leader but a prudent statesman, the treaty, far from signaling weakness, became a catalyst for expansion, allowing Islam to spread its message across the Arabian Peninsula with renewed vigor. The months that followed saw a remarkable transformation. Converts multiplied, including influential tribal leaders whose acceptance of Islam shifted the balance of power. The Quraysh themselves found their position increasingly isolated, as the Muslim community's network of alliances extended ever wider. This period of relative peace facilitated not only religious growth but also economic and social development, as trade routes became more secure and internal cohesion within the Muslim community strengthened. In the wake of the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, the nascent Muslim community found itself poised at the threshold of a new era, one that would extend far beyond the familiar sands and hills of the Arabian Peninsula. What had once been a localized movement, defined by tribal affiliations and regional disputes, was beginning to assume a broader, more universal significance. Central to this transformation was not only the conviction that animated the believers, but the deliberate, measured diplomacy that sought to engage with the wider world, an engagement articulated most notably through a series of letters dispatched to neighboring rulers and powers. According to Islamic tradition, these letters were sent by the Prophet Muhammad himself, carrying messages that combined religious invitation with political overture. They were addressed to kings, emperors, and chieftains who reigned over territories stretching from the Byzantine lands in the north to the Persian domains in the east, and to the rulers of Yemen and Egypt in the south and west. These communications marked a decisive moment in the community's maturation, revealing a strategic understanding that the spread of the message required more than preaching within the confines of Arabia. It demanded diplomacy, dialogue, and the forging of alliances across cultural and political divides. The form and content of these letters reflected the deep-rooted traditions of Arabian diplomacy, tempered by the unique religious mission that Muhammad embodied. Each letter began with phrases invoking the name of God, emphasizing his singularity and mercy, a hallmark of the Islamic proclamation. They extended greetings of peace and goodwill, underscoring a desire not for conquest but for peaceful coexistence and mutual respect. The letters invited recipients to embrace the faith, often presenting Muhammad as a messenger sent by God to guide humanity toward monotheism and righteousness. Yet, they were careful to respect the authority of the addressees and to appeal to their sense of justice and responsibility as leaders. For the rulers who received these letters, the messages posed both a spiritual challenge and a political question. The Byzantine Empire and the Sasanian Persian Empire, long-standing rivals and great powers of the era, provided a backdrop of imperial rivalry and religious complexity. Though the letters themselves did not dwell on the intricacies of these empires' internal affairs, they implicitly acknowledged a world in which Islam was carving out its place. The Byzantine emperor, the Persian king, the Negus of Abyssinia, all were sovereigns whose recognition, or at least consideration of this emerging faith could influence the balance of power in the region. Within the Arabian Peninsula and its immediate environs, the diplomatic overtures were no less significant. The letter to the ruler of Bahrain, for example, addressed the king as a brother and called upon him to accept the faith and protect its followers. To the governor of Syria, a province of the Byzantine Empire, the message conveyed both a spiritual invitation and a subtle assertion of a new order on the rise. These communications were more than mere formalities. They were instruments of statecraft, crafted with an acute awareness of the delicate interplay between faith and politics. The correspondence also reflects the profound transformation of the Islamic community's self-perception. No longer was it a marginalized group struggling for survival. It now conceived itself as a legitimate and distinct polity, worthy of engaging on equal terms with established powers. The letters exemplify a vision of leadership that combined religious authority with political sagacity, where the role of the prophet was not only as a spiritual guide, but as a statesman navigating the complexities of an interconnected world, it is important to view these letters within the broader context of 7th century diplomatic practices. Letter writing was a recognized means of communication among rulers, a way to assert claims, negotiate alliances, or declare intentions without immediate recourse to military action. The letters attributed to Muhammad stand in this tradition, but also carry a unique character, imbued with the urgency and conviction of a new religious message. They illustrate an early example of religious diplomacy, where faith and governance intersected to shape the contours of international relations. The responses to these letters varied, and the historical records, both Islamic and external, indicate a spectrum of reactions ranging from curiosity and openness to outright rejection. For some rulers, the invitation to embrace Islam was met with skepticism or hostility, seen as a threat to their existing authority and religious traditions. Others, however, displayed a degree of respect or cautious engagement, recognizing the growing influence of the Muslim community and the pragmatic benefits of dialogue. Beyond the letters themselves, the expanding horizon of the Muslim community was marked by the establishment of diplomatic envoys and emissaries, who traveled to distant courts to convey messages, negotiate treaties, and foster relations. This network of communication underscored the community's increasing sophistication and its commitment to peaceful coexistence whenever possible. It also laid the groundwork for the rapid expansion that would follow, as alliances were forged and new territories came under the influence of Islam. At the heart of this diplomatic enterprise was a profound belief in the universality of the message Muhammad preached. The letters were not merely political tools, but calls to embrace a vision of monotheism that transcended ethnic and cultural boundaries. They reflected a conviction that the faith was not confined to Arabia, but destined to reach all corners of the known world, inviting rulers and peoples alike to join in a shared spiritual journey. As we reflect on these letters and the expanding horizon they represent, we see the emergence of an Islamic polity that was both deeply connected to its Arabian origins and dynamically engaged with the wider world. It was a community that understood the necessity of communication across differences, of respect for sovereign powers, and of the strategic use of diplomacy to advance a transformative vision. As the nascent Muslim community in Medina took shape, its survival and growth depended not only on faith but on pragmatic responses to a complex and often hostile environment. The city, a mosaic of tribes and clans with long-standing rivalries, had become a refuge for Muhammad and his followers, yet beyond its immediate borders lingered persistent threats that could not be ignored. One such peril lay to the north, in the fertile oasis of Khaybar, a region known for its wealth, strategic position, and a population that included formidable Jewish tribes who had cultivated the land for generations. The story of Khaybar, its conquest, and the subsequent treaties forged there would prove pivotal in consolidating the Muslim community's hold on Medina and securing the stability necessary for its future expansion. Khaybar was no ordinary settlement. Situated about 150 kilometers north of Medina, it was a lush and well-watered cluster of fortresses and villages encircled by date palms and arable fields, a stark contrast to the harsher desert surroundings. The oasis had served as an agricultural hub for centuries, its inhabitants skilled in irrigation and farming, producing abundant harvests that supported a thriving, if insular, society. The Jewish tribes of Khaybar had established themselves as both economic players and regional power brokers, their influence extending beyond the oasis itself. For the Muslim community in Medina, whose own survival was precarious in the face of external hostility, from Meccan Quraysh opponents to other regional actors, Khaybar represented both a challenge and an opportunity. The tensions between Medina and Khaybar had roots in the shifting alliances and enmities that characterized the Arabian Peninsula at the time. The Jewish tribes of Khaybar had previously allied with Meccan forces against the Muslims during the Battle of the Trench, lending their military support in an attempt to suppress the growing power of Muhammad's followers. This experience left deep scars and underscored the vulnerability of the Muslim community to threats emanating from the north. Moreover, Khaybar's proximity to Medina meant that its fortifications could serve as staging grounds for hostile raids, jeopardizing the fragile security of the city and its hinterlands. In this context, the decision to march on Khaybar in 629 CE was both strategic and symbolic. The campaign was led by Muhammad himself, who understood that the consolidation of Medina's position required neutralizing threats in its immediate neighborhood and securing access to vital resources. The siege of Khaybar unfolded over several weeks, marked by determined resistance from the oasis's defenders and calculated military tactics from the Muslim forces. The fortresses that dotted the landscape, strongholds of the Jewish tribes, were taken one by one, their defenders demonstrating both bravery and tenacity. Yet, the combination of persistence, strategic ingenuity, and the moral resolve of the Muslim forces gradually tipped the balance. When the city finally capitulated, the terms of surrender established a new order. Rather than expelling the inhabitants or annihilating the local population, Muhammad negotiated a treaty that allowed the Jewish cultivators to remain on their lands, now under Muslim sovereignty, in exchange for sharing the agricultural produce and recognizing the political authority of Medina's new leadership. This arrangement was both practical and visionary. It ensured a steady flow of food to support Medina's growing population and integrated Khaybar's economic potential into the wider Islamic polity. At the same time, it demonstrated a nuanced approach to governance, one that combined military victory with accommodation, fostering coexistence rather than relentless conflict. The Treaty of Khaybar became a template for subsequent dealings with other communities, highlighting a mode of expansion based not solely on conquest, but on negotiated settlement and mutual benefit. The Jewish inhabitants, while no longer autonomous, retained a degree of cultural and religious identity, continuing to live and work the land under the protective auspices of the Muslim state. This model of inclusion, tempered by the realities of political dominance, contributed to the broader stability that the Medinan community sought after years of upheaval. Beyond the immediate military and economic implications, the conquest of Khaybar had profound psychological and social effects on the Muslim community. It marked a turning point in the consolidation of Muhammad's leadership and the affirmation of Medina as the undisputed center of the Islamic movement. The victory sent a clear message to allies and adversaries alike. The Muslim polity was capable of defending itself and expanding its influence, combining faith with effective statecraft. It also bolstered the morale of the believers, many of whom had endured exile, persecution, and battle, offering tangible proof that their cause was advancing. The security concerns that Khaybar addressed were emblematic of the broader challenges facing Medina at this time. The city lay at the nexus of tribal rivalries and shifting allegiances. With the Quraysh of Mecca still eager to undermine Muhammad's authority, hostilities had not ceased, and the Muslim community remained vigilant to threats from multiple directions. The consolidation achieved through the Khaybar campaign allowed for a more confident posture, enabling the community to focus on internal development and further diplomatic engagements. The emphasis on securing resources and alliances, rather than mere military conquest, reflected a sophisticated understanding of governance that balanced immediate needs with long-term stability. This period also saw the strengthening of Medina's agricultural base, a critical element for sustaining the growing population and providing for the needs of its residents and soldiers alike. The lands of Khaybar, with their fertile soil and efficient irrigation systems, contributed significantly to this foundation. The integration of these lands into the Islamic polity underscored the pragmatic approach Muhammad adopted to building a durable community, one that could withstand external pressures and nurture its people through economic self-sufficiency. In reflecting on Khaybar and its aftermath, we glimpse the profound challenges and remarkable achievements that defined the early Islamic State. The campaign was not merely a military episode, but a transformative moment that exemplified the balanced approach Muhammad employed, a combination of spiritual conviction and worldly wisdom. It was a testament to the resilience of a people bound by belief yet anchored in the realities of their time, forging a path that would reverberate through centuries and across continents. The Treaty of Hudaybiyah, concluded in the 6th year of the Hijra, stands as one of the most pivotal moments in the early Islamic narrative, a fragile accord between the nascent Muslim community of Medina and the Quraysh of Mecca, the city that had long been both spiritual heart and formidable adversary. For the Muslims, the treaty represented a strategic pause, a rare respite from the cycle of conflict that had defined the previous decade. It was an agreement that, on the surface, seemed to favor the Quraysh, imposing conditions that many of Muhammad's followers found difficult to accept. Yet, beneath its terms lay a profound opportunity, a chance to consolidate, to build alliances, and to gradually shift the balance of power without resorting to immediate warfare. However, the fragile peace was not to endure unchallenged. The treaty stipulated that allied tribes on either side were bound to honor its terms, but the Arabian tribal landscape was complex and often unruly, shaped by loyalties that transcended formal agreements. It was in this volatile environment that the violation occurred. The Banu Bakr, a clan allied with the Quraysh, launched a sudden attack on the Banu Qusar, who were supporters of the Muslims and protected under the treaty. This breach of the accord was more than a mere skirmish. It was a deliberate provocation that threatened to unravel the delicate truce and plunge the region back into conflict. News of this violation spread swiftly, reaching the ears of Abu Sufyan ibn Harb, the leading figure of the Quraysh and a man long wary of Muhammad's growing influence. Abu Sufyan, despite his hardened stance against the Muslims, understood the gravity of the situation. The breach risked not only reigniting hostilities, but also destabilizing Mecca itself, which had enjoyed a period of relative calm and economic stability thanks to the treaty's constraints. His concern was pragmatic. The repercussions of renewed warfare would be devastating to the city's trade and prestige, threatening the very foundation of Quraysh authority. Meanwhile, in Medina, Muhammad faced a moment of profound decision. The violation of Hudaybiyah was a clear casus belli, a justification to respond with force. Yet the Prophet and his companions chose a path marked by disciplined resolve and strategic subtlety. The decision was made to prepare for a pilgrimage to Mecca the following year, not as supplicants but as a powerful, unified force. The march itself was enveloped in secrecy and careful planning, a demonstration of both patience and strength. Muhammad's followers, numbering in the thousands, set out in the spring of 629 CE, their purpose unmistakable, yet their demeanor restrained. They carried no weapons of aggression, only the intent to reclaim the right to perform the sacred pilgrimage and to assert their place within the sacred geography of Arabia. As the sands of the Arabian Peninsula shifted beneath the relentless desert winds, the stage was set for a momentous event that would forever alter the course of history: a return to Mecca, not as a supplicant or exile, but as the triumphant leader of a burgeoning faith and a united community. The conquest of Mecca in the year 630 CE stands as a defining chapter in the life of the Prophet Muhammad and the early Islamic movement, a chapter marked not by the spectacle of violence, but by the profound power of mercy and forgiveness at the moment of victory. For years, Mecca had been the bastion of the Quraysh tribe's economic and spiritual authority, its streets echoing with the calls of merchants and pilgrims who came to pay homage to the Kaaba, then still a sanctuary crowded with idols representing a pantheon of gods worshipped by the polytheistic tribes of Arabia. This city, Muhammad's birthplace, had witnessed his early preaching and the fierce opposition it provoked. It was here that he had endured rejection, boycotts, and attempts on his life, culminating in his migration to Medina over a decade earlier. Now, the balance of power had irrevocably shifted. The alliances forged, the battles fought, and the years of steadfast faith had culminated in a peaceful march toward Mecca, a march underscored by a strategic blend of diplomacy and resolve. Muhammad's approach to Mecca was calculated yet compassionate. His forces, numbering in the tens of thousands, advanced with minimal bloodshed, a testament to the careful planning and the deep respect he commanded. According to Islamic tradition, the Prophet entered the city humbly, eschewing any display of triumphalism. His demeanor was that of a man who had endured hardship and emerged not seeking vengeance but reconciliation. This humility was a reflection of his profound spiritual teachings, that true strength lay not in domination but in compassion and justice. At the heart of this historic moment was the declaration of a general amnesty. Contrary to expectations of retribution, Muhammad granted pardon to the majority of his former adversaries. This unprecedented act of clemency was revolutionary in a world where tribal conflicts were often settled with cycles of blood vengeance. Forgiveness became the instrument of unity, transforming former foes into allies and fostering a nascent sense of communal identity that transcended previous divisions. One of the most symbolic acts of the conquest was the cleansing of the Kaaba. For centuries, this sacred sanctuary had housed countless idols, each representing the diverse deities venerated by the Arabian tribes. Muhammad's directive to remove these idols was not merely an act of religious purification, but a profound statement of the new spiritual order. The Kaaba was restored to its original purpose as a monotheistic sanctuary dedicated solely to the worship of the one God, Allah. This act signified the symbolic end of pagan Meccan domination and the beginning of a unified Islamic identity centered on monotheism. The narratives recount Muhammad's careful and deliberate dismantling of the idols, treating even those who had once opposed him with respect and dignity. This was not a scene of destruction fueled by hatred, but a transformative moment that invited reflection and renewal. The Prophet's actions underscored the principle that faith must be embraced through conviction and understanding, not coercion. In the days following the conquest, Muhammad's leadership continued to embody the virtues of humility and justice. He refrained from exploiting his victory for personal gain or political domination. Instead, he focused on healing the wounds of a divided society, ensuring that the transition of power was peaceful and inclusive. His emphasis on social justice and the protection of the vulnerable laid the groundwork for the ethical framework that would define the emerging Islamic State. The conquest also brought with it significant social and cultural changes. The once fragmented tribes of Arabia began to coalesce under the banner of Islam. Traditional practices that had perpetuated cycles of violence and retribution were gradually replaced by laws and customs derived from Islamic principles. The unity achieved through Muhammad's leadership was not merely political but deeply spiritual, marking the consolidation of a community bound by shared beliefs and values. The legacy of the conquest endures not only in the annals of history, but in the hearts of millions who recognize it as a turning point, where the ideals of forgiveness overcame the forces of division. It invites contemplation on the power of mercy to heal deep-seated conflicts and to forge new beginnings, even in the aftermath of profound struggle. As the Kaaba stands today, a symbol of monotheistic worship and Islamic unity, it silently testifies to that pivotal moment when an ancient city was transformed, not through the sword alone, but through the courage to forgive and the strength to embrace a future defined by peace. The conquest of Mecca remains a testament to the enduring human capacity for reconciliation and the profound impact one individual can have in shaping the moral and spiritual contours of an entire civilization. In the wake of the conquest of Mecca, a profound transformation swept across the Arabian Peninsula, yet the embers of resistance still glowed in the hearts of some tribes who viewed the rising power of Muhammad and his followers with apprehension and defiance. Among these were the Hawazin and the Thaqif, two formidable tribes whose influence and martial prowess had long shaped the politics of the region. Their story, entwined with the dramatic Battle of Hunain and the subsequent siege of Taif, represents the final flickers of opposition to the burgeoning Islamic State, a chapter of tension, turmoil, and ultimately reconciliation. The Hawazin, a confederation of Bedouin tribes dwelling east of Mecca, and the Thaqif, inhabiting the fortified city of Taif nestled in the mountains, had maintained a wary stance toward the expanding influence of Muhammad. Their societies were not merely tribal entities, but hubs of economic and military strength, deeply intertwined with the pre-Islamic customs and alliances that had defined Arabia for generations. The rapid ascendancy of Islam threatened this established order, and so these tribes gathered their forces, determined to challenge Muhammad's authority. This challenge culminated in the Battle of Hunain, fought in the year 630 CE, shortly after the peaceful submission of Mecca. The engagement took place in the Valley of Hunain, a narrow rocky defile surrounded by rugged terrain, which the Hawazin and Thaqif chose deliberately, aiming to exploit their knowledge of the landscape and their mobile cavalry's agility. Their numbers were significant, around 20,000 strong, assembled with the intent to crush the nascent Muslim community before it could consolidate its hold over Arabia. Muhammad's forces, though fewer in number, marched resolutely into the valley, confident from their recent victories yet aware of the formidable opposition they faced. According to Islamic tradition, the battle began disastrously for the Muslims. The Hawazins' ambush tactics sowed confusion and fear, causing many to falter and retreat in the initial moments. The Prophet himself, demonstrating calm leadership amidst chaos, rallied his companions, calling upon their steadfastness and faith. Slowly, the tide turned. The disciplined ranks reformed, and with renewed vigor, they mounted a counterattack that shattered the enemy lines. The Battle of Hunain was fierce and costly, marked by moments of desperation and courage on both sides. Yet, the eventual Muslim victory decisively broke the military power of the Hawazin and their allies. What followed was a scene emblematic of the new era Muhammad sought to forge. Rather than harsh retribution, the spoils of war were distributed generously among the fighters, fostering unity and gratitude. The captives and defeated tribes were treated with clemency, a gesture that underscored the Islamic principles of mercy and reconciliation, even in the aftermath of conflict. Despite their defeat, the Thaqif refused immediate submission. Their city of Taif, renowned for its strong fortifications and strategic mountain position, became the next focal point. Muhammad led a siege against Taif, a campaign that tested the resolve of both besiegers and besieged. For weeks the siege ensued, with neither side gaining a decisive advantage. The Thaqif's defenders, familiar with every crag and pass, repelled assaults and sustained their resistance, while the Muslim forces, encamped outside the city walls, contended with the harsh environment and the strain of prolonged engagement. This standoff at Taif was not merely a military confrontation but also a profound moment of reflection for Muhammad and his followers. Recognizing the limits of force, the Prophet eventually lifted the siege, choosing to pursue a path of diplomacy and persuasion rather than continued warfare. This decision illustrated a nuanced understanding of power, acknowledging when to press forward and when to seek peace. In the months that followed, the Thaqif gradually came to embrace Islam, influenced by the changing tides of loyalty and the example set by the Islamic community. Their reconciliation with Muhammad's movement was emblematic of a broader pattern witnessed across Arabia during this period. Tribes once opposed became integrated members of the Muslim Ummah, the community united not only by faith but by shared purpose and mutual respect. The aftermath of Hunayn and Taif thus marks a pivotal moment in early Islamic history. It was a testament to the resilience of Muhammad's leadership and the transformative power of his message. The unity forged through these trials laid the groundwork for the consolidation of the Arabian Peninsula under Islam, dissolving old rivalries and establishing a new social order grounded in monotheism, justice, and communal solidarity. As the spoils of Hunayn were distributed and former adversaries embraced the faith, the social fabric of Arabia was irrevocably altered. The once fractious tribes found common cause in a vision that transcended ancestry and tribal allegiance. The battles and sieges of this era were not merely conflicts over territory or power, but were struggles over identity and destiny, struggles that would echo through the centuries in the shaping of an expansive civilization. Today, the story of Hunayn and the siege of Taif invites us to contemplate the complexities of conflict and reconciliation, the interplay between force and mercy, and the enduring human capacity to heal divisions through dialogue and faith. It reminds us that history is often written not only by the victors, but also by the choices they make in victory, choices that define the moral compass of societies for generations to come. In the rugged valley of Hunayn and the fortified slopes of Taif, the last fires of resistance to Muhammad's mission were kindled and then extinguished, illuminating a path toward unity that would forever alter the course of Arabian history and the world beyond. As the dust of conflict settled over the Arabian Peninsula, a new chapter in its history began to unfold. One marked not by swords and sieges, but by journeys and dialogues, by the slow weaving of a tapestry of faith and politics that would forever alter the region's landscape. The year was known among the early Muslim community as the Year of Delegations, a time when the tribes of Arabia, once fiercely independent and often at odds with one another, began to send emissaries to Medina. These delegations were not mere formalities. They were the embodiment of a profound transformation, signaling a shift from fragmented tribal rivalry toward a nascent unity under the banner of Islam. Medina, formerly known as Yathrib, had already emerged as a sanctuary for Muhammad and his followers after their perilous migration from Mecca. This city, nestled among date palms and fertile lands, was a mosaic of clans and tribes, some Jewish, others Arab, who had long lived side by side, but often with tension and competition. Muhammad's arrival and the establishment of the first Muslim community there introduced a new paradigm, one that sought to transcend tribal boundaries through a shared sense of spiritual purpose and social justice. The delegations that arrived in Medina were representatives of a diverse array of tribes, each with its own customs, histories, and power structures. From the distant reaches of the Najd Desert to the coastal tribes along the Red Sea, these groups recognized in Muhammad a figure of authority and legitimacy, a leader whose message and moral vision promised a new order amid the chaos of the desert. Their visits were at once political maneuvers and spiritual pilgrimages, as they sought not only alliances but also instruction in the teachings that had begun to ripple across the peninsula. Negotiations played a central role in this period. The delegations came bearing not only gifts and pledges of allegiance, but also questions and concerns. Tribal chiefs and elders engaged in discussions with Muhammad and his close companions, probing the implications of embracing Islam, how it would affect their traditional customs, their allegiances, and their standing among the broader Arabian world, these conversations were marked by a remarkable blend of pragmatism and faith, as the delegations weighed the tangible benefits of political unity and protection against the spiritual call to submit to the one God. Integral to the process of unification was the establishment of a framework for governance and social welfare that transcended the old tribal codes. Central among these was the institution of zakat, the obligatory almsgiving that became a pillar of the emerging community. Zakat was more than a charitable act. It was a formal mechanism for redistributing wealth, supporting the needy, and binding the community together through mutual responsibility. By institutionalizing this practice, Muhammad laid the groundwork for a society where social cohesion was reinforced by ethical imperatives, creating a sense of shared destiny and collective care. Alongside zakat, teaching and religious instruction formed a vital part of the delegation's visits. Muhammad and his followers dedicated themselves to explaining the tenets of Islam, elucidating its monotheistic creed, its ethical commandments, and the vision of a just society rooted in compassion and accountability. These teachings resonated deeply in a land long accustomed to polytheism and tribal deities, offering a compelling alternative that promised both spiritual fulfillment and social reform. The spread of Medina's authority during this time was not merely a matter of conquest or coercion, rather, it was a dynamic process of persuasion and alliance building, a negotiation of identities and loyalties that required sensitivity to long-standing customs while introducing a revolutionary religious ethos. Medina became the political and spiritual capital of this new order, its influence radiating outward as tribes chose to affiliate themselves voluntarily, recognizing in Muhammad's leadership a source of stability and legitimacy that transcended traditional divisions. This period also witnessed the formalization of the Constitution of Medina, a groundbreaking document that codified the rights and responsibilities of the city's diverse inhabitants. It established principles of mutual defense, dispute resolution, and religious coexistence, laying a foundation for a pluralistic society united by common laws and shared commitments. The Constitution was a testament to Muhammad's vision of community, a ummah, that embraced difference yet fostered solidarity, ensuring that the various groups could live together in peace and cooperation under the new Islamic framework. As delegations returned to their homelands, bearing the message and the blessings of Medina, the ripple effects were profound. Tribes that had once been locked in cycles of retribution and rivalry began to see themselves as part of a larger whole, bound by faith and collective responsibility. The spread of Islam was not merely a spiritual awakening, it was the forging of a political and social revolution that redefined Arabian identity. It was a movement that would, in time, unite the peninsula, laying the foundation for the rapid expansion of Islamic civilization beyond Arabia's deserts. The Year of Delegations, therefore, stands as a pivotal moment in the early Islamic narrative, a time when the abstract ideals of faith were translated into tangible political realities, when the vision of a united ummah began to take shape through dialogue, negotiation, and shared commitment. It was a testament to the power of ideas to transcend entrenched divisions, to inspire loyalty and cooperation where once there had been enmity. In reflecting on this transformative chapter, we see how the strength of Muhammad's leadership lay not only in his spiritual authority, but also in his ability to navigate the complex social and political landscape of 7th century Arabia. By welcoming delegations, engaging in earnest dialogue, instituting social welfare through zakat, and fostering a sense of communal identity, he laid the groundwork for a civilization whose legacy would endure far beyond the deserts of Medina. As the years passed, the nascent Muslim community found itself no longer confined to the immediate environs of Medina, but increasingly drawn into the broader currents of regional power and influence. The Arabian Peninsula, long a land of tribal skirmishes and shifting alliances, was beginning to feel the reach of a new force, one that combined spiritual purpose with political ambition. It was against this backdrop, in the year 630 CE, that the Prophet Muhammad embarked upon what would come to be known as the Expedition to Tabuk, a journey that would test the endurance, discipline, and unity of his followers in ways previously unimagined. Tabuk, a remote outpost near the northern edge of Arabia, lay close to the borders traditionally held by the Byzantine sphere of influence. Though no direct battle would ultimately come of this expedition, the mere prospect of an advancing Muslim force stirred unease in the region and introduced a new dimension to the Islamic polity, its symbolic assertion of authority far beyond the desert heartlands. The expedition itself was born out of rumors and intelligence reports hinting at an imminent Byzantine threat, a possibility that, whether fully grounded or exaggerated, demanded a decisive response. The call to arms was issued, and from Medina, a force of approximately 30,000 men was mustered, a remarkable testament to the growth and organization of the Muslim community. Yet, the journey to Tabuk was not one of glory or conquest. Rather, it was a march into hardship and uncertainty. The Arabian summer was at its peak, and the desert heat was merciless. Water was scarce, and provisions had to be carefully rationed. Many within the ranks questioned the necessity of the expedition, especially as no enemy forces materialized on the horizon. Some whispered doubts, others expressed reluctance, and a few even faltered in their commitment. In this crucible of trial, the Prophet's leadership was once again tested, not only his resolve but also the discipline he had instilled in his followers. The march to Tabuk revealed the complex human realities underlying the ideal of a unified ummah. While many embraced the challenge with unwavering faith, others hesitated, their motivations complicated by fear, fatigue, or personal circumstance. Historical accounts hint at instances of hypocrisy and wavering loyalty, as some individuals chose to remain behind, citing excuses that ranged from illness to familial obligations. These moments of human frailty were not lost upon Muhammad, who viewed them with both sternness and compassion. The expedition in essence became a mirror reflecting the tensions between communal obligation and individual circumstance, between the demands of faith and the pull of worldly concerns. Yet, despite these challenges, the Muslim force arrived at Tabuk and established a camp, demonstrating both strategic foresight and a commitment to projecting power into the northern reaches of Arabia. No Byzantine army appeared, and no pitched battle was fought. But the expedition itself sent a clear message. The Muslim polity was no longer a peripheral desert movement, but a formidable presence willing to defend its interests and extend its influence. This symbolic reach was as significant as any military victory. By advancing to Tabuk, Muhammad not only countered the rumors of external threat, but also asserted the unity and strength of his community in the face of uncertainty. The expedition became a defining moment in the consolidation of Islamic authority, signaling to allies and adversaries alike that the movement was prepared to engage with the wider geopolitical realities of the time. In the quiet nights beneath the vast desert sky, as the army encamped at Tabuk, the significance of the moment lay not in confrontation but in affirmation, a testament to the growing maturity and resilience of a community transitioning from a persecuted minority to a polity with aspirations and responsibilities that spanned the northern horizon. When the expedition concluded and the forces returned to Medina, the repercussions were felt across the peninsula. The journey had deepened the bonds among the faithful, while also exposing the need for continued vigilance and unity. The episode at Tabuk stands as a poignant reminder that the story of early Islam was not solely one of divine revelation or spiritual awakening, but also one of human endurance, political acumen, and the negotiation of complex social realities. In the final reckoning, the expedition to Tabuk marked a pivotal chapter in the emergence of Islam as a force capable of transcending tribal boundaries and engaging with the broader world. It was a journey into the unknown that, despite its hardships and the absence of battle, profoundly shaped the trajectory of the Muslim community and heralded a new era of interaction between Arabia and its northern neighbors. As the year 10 AH 632 CE dawned upon the Arabian Peninsula, the Prophet Muhammad, now in his early 60s, stood at the threshold of a momentous chapter that would seal the legacy of his prophetic mission. It was a time when the fledgling Muslim community had transformed from a beleaguered sect within the tribal tapestry of Arabia into a unified polity, bound not by bloodlines alone but by shared faith, law, and a profound sense of collective purpose. Yet, amid this triumph, Muhammad's health had begun to wane, signaling that the culmination of his earthly journey was near. With this awareness, he resolved to undertake what history would remember as the farewell pilgrimage, a final act of devotion and instruction that would echo throughout the centuries. The pilgrimage to Mecca, or Hajj, was not a new rite. It was deeply rooted in the religious consciousness of Arabia, a sacred journey that drew tribes together in a powerful expression of spiritual unity. However, the farewell pilgrimage carried a unique gravity. For the first time since the revelation began, Muhammad would return to the Kaaba not as a persecuted outsider, but as the esteemed leader of a vast and growing community. His arrival in the city was met with a mixture of reverence, awe, and heartfelt devotion, as thousands of Muslims from across the Arabian Peninsula gathered to witness and participate in this historic moment. Throughout the pilgrimage, the Prophet engaged in the traditional rites, circumambulating the Kaaba, standing in prayer on the plains of Arafat, and performing the symbolic stoning of the devil at Mina. Yet, it was during the gathering on the plain of Arafat that Muhammad delivered what would become one of the most significant sermons in Islamic history. This address was not merely a reiteration of ritual, but a comprehensive ethical manifesto, a summation of the values and principles that had guided his mission and that would continue to guide the Muslim Ummah, or community, long after his passing. Central to this sermon was a profound affirmation of human dignity and equality. Muhammad declared that no Arab held superiority over a non-Arab, nor did any white person have advantage over a black person, except through piety and righteous conduct. This radical assertion challenged the entrenched hierarchies and tribal privileges that had long dictated social relations in Arabia. By elevating moral virtue and accountability to the highest status, Muhammad laid the foundation for a universal brotherhood that transcended race, lineage, and social rank. Trust and honesty also featured prominently in the Prophet's final sermon. He exhorted his followers to honor their covenants, to eschew deceit and oppression, and to uphold the ethical standards that would bind the community together. These injunctions were not abstract ideals but practical imperatives for sustaining the social fabric amid rapid expansion and diversity. Muhammad's insistence on justice, fairness, and mutual respect was designed to ensure that the Muslim community would flourish not only as a spiritual entity, but as a just and equitable society. Importantly, the farewell pilgrimage marked the completion of Muhammad's public mission. The revelations that had been conveyed over more than 2 decades had reached their fullness, and the Quranic message was now firmly established. The communal practices, laws, and ethical codes had been articulated and exemplified through the Prophet's own life and leadership. This moment was both an ending and a beginning, a conclusion of the prophetic journey and the inauguration of a new era in which the community itself would bear the responsibility of preserving and advancing the faith. As the sun set on the plains of Arafat, Muhammad's parting words resonated deeply with those present. He reminded them that all humans were created from a single soul, emphasizing the intrinsic unity and interconnectedness of humanity. This was a call to transcend divisions, to embrace compassion, and to live in harmony. It was a message that would underpin the moral and spiritual ethos of Islam, inspiring millions across time and geography. The farewell pilgrimage thus stands as a poignant testament to the Prophet's enduring legacy, a final testament to the principles of equality, justice, and dignity that had animated his prophetic mission from the very beginning. It was a moment when history paused to bear witness to the profound transformation of a society, a gathering where faith and humanity converged in a vision of a world renewed. In the months that followed, the Muslim community would face the challenge of navigating the Prophet's absence, tasked with preserving the unity and ideals he had so eloquently articulated. Yet the farewell pilgrimage remained a beacon, a guiding light illuminating the path forward. Through the ages, it has continued to inspire believers to embody the values of trust, respect, and equality, a timeless message from a final journey, a last sermon, and a legacy that endures beyond the sands of Arabia. As the sun dipped low over the city of Medina, casting long shadows across its ancient streets and palm-lined courtyards, a somber stillness settled upon the community that had come to revere Muhammad, not only as a prophet, but as a steadfast leader, a father figure, and a source of solace in turbulent times. The months following the farewell pilgrimage, which had marked the culmination of his public mission, ushered in a period of profound trial, one that would test the faith, resilience, and unity of the early Muslim Ummah in ways previously unimagined. The Prophet's health, once robust and unwavering despite the burdens he bore, began to wane, signaling an approaching chapter of both vulnerability and spiritual significance. Muhammad's final illness unfolded quietly yet inexorably within the walls of his modest home, nestled in the heart of Medina. Islamic tradition recounts that the Prophet endured great physical suffering during this time, with bouts of fever and weakness that confined him more and more often. Yet, even as his body grew frail, his spirit remained unshaken, and his concern never strayed from the welfare of his followers and the future of the nascent Islamic community. The gravity of this period was palpable. It stirred a collective anxiety among those who had come to rely on his guidance. a sense of impending loss that rippled through the streets, marketplaces, and mosques alike. Central to this intimate circle of care was Aisha, the Prophet's wife, whose devotion and attentiveness provided both comfort and practical support. Alongside her stood Fatima, Muhammad's beloved daughter, whose presence was emblematic of the deep familial bonds that underpin the community's strength. Fatima's grief was profound. She was not only mourning the declining health of her father, but also acutely aware of the void his absence would create. Her sorrow was a mirror of the larger emotional landscape, one where personal loss intertwined with communal uncertainty and the heavy weight of responsibility for what lay beyond. Despite his frailty, Muhammad remained committed to fulfilling his spiritual duties. One of the most poignant moments during this final chapter was his leading of the prayers, even when his strength was diminished. According to Islamic tradition, the Prophet continued to stand and lead the congregational prayers in the mosque, a testament to his unwavering devotion and the example he set for his followers. His presence at the head of the congregation was both a source of inspiration and a stark reminder of the finite nature of mortal life. Each prayer became a sacred convergence of faith, hope, and the silent acknowledgement of an approaching farewell. Among those present during these days was Abu Bakr, one of Muhammad's closest companions and steadfast supporters. Abu Bakr's role transcended friendship. He was a pillar of stability, known for his wisdom, humility, and unshakable commitment to the prophetic mission. As the Prophet's condition worsened, Abu Bakr's presence took on greater significance, offering reassurance to the community and embodying the continuity of leadership that would become crucial in the days to come. His calm demeanor and readiness to serve underscored the delicate balance between mourning and the imperative to preserve unity. The mood in Medina was heavy with apprehension. The city's inhabitants, from the elders to the youngest children, felt the weight of an uncertain future pressing upon them. Neighbors gathered in quiet conversations, sharing whispered prayers and hopes, while the ever-present sounds of the call to prayer seemed tinged with a deeper poignancy. The mosque, usually a place of vibrant communal gathering, assumed an atmosphere of reverence and restrained sorrow. In this crucible of emotion, the bonds of brotherhood and faith were both challenged and reaffirmed. Within the household, the emotional atmosphere was intensified by the intimate presence of those closest to Muhammad. Fatima's tears, the gentle ministrations of Aisha, and the watchful care of Ali, the Prophet's cousin and son-in-law, painted a tableau of familial devotion entwined with spiritual resolve. Their grief was tempered by the profound understanding that the Prophet's mission was not his alone, but belonged to the collective conscience of all believers. This recognition, while a source of solace, also underscored the urgency of preparing for the transition that lay ahead. The final illness did not merely signify physical decline, it marked a transformative moment in the history of Islam. It was a juncture where the community was called to internalize the Prophet's teachings more deeply, to embody the principles he had lived by, and to envisage a future without his direct presence. The anxiety that pervaded Medina was thus not only about loss, but about the preservation of a legacy of faith, justice, compassion, and unity. As the days passed, the proximity of the Prophet's passing became increasingly evident. Yet, even in this shadow, moments of grace and spiritual affirmation shone through. According to tradition, Muhammad's final words were suffused with concern for his community, urging them to hold fast to the teachings of Islam and to remain steadfast in their commitment to God and one another. This appeal was not merely a farewell but a charge, a call to carry forward a vision of ethical living and communal harmony that transcended his own lifetime. The impact of the Prophet's final illness on Medina cannot be overstated. It was a period in which the community grappled with the impending void of leadership and the challenge of maintaining cohesion among diverse tribes and individuals newly united under the banner of Islam. The anxiety and sorrow mingled with a profound sense of purpose, as the followers of Muhammad prepared to face an uncertain future with faith as their compass. In reflecting on this pivotal chapter, one is reminded of the human dimension that underlies even the most monumental historical figures. Muhammad's final illness underscores the reality that leadership, no matter how divinely inspired or widely revered, is subject to the vulnerabilities of the human condition, yet it also reveals the enduring power of faith and community to transcend individual mortality, ensuring that the seeds sown by one life can blossom across generations. The final days of the Prophet Muhammad were marked by a profound sense of solemnity and quiet preparation, as the weight of his imminent departure settled upon those closest to him. In the sanctuary of his home in Medina, surrounded by devoted family and companions, Muhammad's health waned, his breaths growing shallow in the cool desert air. According to Islamic tradition, he continued to embody patience and unwavering faith, his mind fixed on the divine mission that had guided him through decades of hardship, revelation, and leadership. The city that had once welcomed him as a humble teacher now faced the unimaginable prospect of life without its guiding light. Among those present, Umar ibn al-Khattab, the fierce warrior and steadfast companion, was struck by a shock so profound that it threatened to unravel the fragile fabric of the nascent Muslim community. Known for his resolute nature and unyielding courage on the battlefield, Umar found himself unarmed against the crushing reality of the Prophet's decline. His voice, once commanding and certain, faltered as he grappled with the prospect of a world forever altered. To many, Umar's grief was a mirror of the collective anguish felt across Medina, a city steeped in hope and transformation, now shadowed by sorrow. Yet, amidst the heavy silence and rising despair, it was Abu Bakr, the Prophet's closest friend and confidant, who emerged as a pillar of strength and reassurance. With measured calm and profound wisdom, Abu Bakr stepped forward to address the community, his words a balm to frayed nerves and a beacon for uncertain hearts. He reminded the believers of the enduring promise that the message itself, rooted in the oneness of God, would persevere beyond any individual life. If you worship Muhammad, he declared, then know that Muhammad is dead. But if you worship God, then God is alive and will never die. This declaration was not merely a statement of faith, but a call to unity, urging the community to find stability through their shared beliefs rather than their attachment to a mortal guide. In the days following the Prophet's passing, the city of Medina became the stage for a critical and delicate moment in Islamic history. The gathering at Saqifa, a roofed enclosure of the Banu Sa'ida clan, convened swiftly as various factions sought to determine the future leadership of the Muslim community. The urgency of this assembly reflected the profound challenges ahead: the preservation of unity, the safeguarding of the faith's integrity, and the navigation of a complex tribal society accustomed to loyalty based on kinship and power. Within this charged atmosphere, voices rose with varying visions for succession, reflecting both the depth of devotion to Muhammad and the practical necessity of political stewardship. Abu Bakr's emergence as a central figure during the Saqifa meeting was no accident. His long-standing relationship with the Prophet, his reputation for piety and wisdom, and his unwavering commitment to Islam positioned him as a natural candidate to lead. As the discussions unfolded, Abu Bakr's ability to articulate a vision grounded in continuity and faith resonated deeply with those present. His election as the first caliph, or successor, was a moment of both relief and resolve, a commitment to uphold the Prophet's mission without the Prophet himself. This transition was not without its complexities and tensions. The decision at Saqifa was made expeditiously, and while it secured immediate leadership, it also sowed the seeds for future debates and divisions within the Muslim community. Nonetheless, Abu Bakr's caliphate set the precedent for a system of governance that would carry Islam beyond the Arabian Peninsula, shaping the political and spiritual contours of the emerging Muslim world. As Abu Bakr assumed his role, he faced the immense task of unifying a diverse and rapidly expanding community. His leadership was characterized by a deep sense of responsibility, humility, and steadfast dedication to the teachings of the Prophet. The challenges were numerous: tribes tempted to revert to old allegiances, factions disputing authority, and the need to consolidate the revelations and practices that defined the faith. Yet, Abu Bakr's tenure, though brief, was foundational, enabling the nascent Islamic State to navigate the turbulent waters of transition with a steady hand. In the quiet moments following the tumult of Saqifa, as the sun set over the Medina skyline, a new chapter began for Islam, one defined not by the presence of its founding prophet, but by the commitment of those who would carry forward his vision, a vision of monotheism, justice, and community that continues to resonate across the world today. This moment of transition, fraught with uncertainty and hope, stands as a profound reminder: the story of a faith is as much about its people and their choices as it is about its origins. As the sun dipped below the horizon of 7th century Arabia, casting long shadows over the city of Medina, the world of Islam stood at a crossroads, one marked by profound loss but also immense promise. The Prophet Muhammad, whose life and teachings had ignited a spiritual and social revolution across the Arabian Peninsula, had passed from this world. Yet, the movement he had kindled was far from extinguished. Instead, it was poised to enter a new phase, one in which the preservation and expansion of his legacy would shape not only the immediate region, but the course of human history itself. In the immediate aftermath of Muhammad's death in 632 CE, the nascent Muslim community faced the daunting task of continuity amid grief. The question of leadership was urgent and delicate, for the unity of the Ummah, the collective community of believers, depended on it. Abu Bakr, one of Muhammad's closest companions and a man renowned for his steadfast faith and wisdom, was chosen as the first caliph, or successor. This marked the beginning of the caliphate, a political and spiritual institution charged with safeguarding the integrity of the message and guiding the community through uncertain times. Central to this endeavor was the preservation of the Quran, the revealed scripture that Muslims believe to be the literal word of God, conveyed to Muhammad over 23 years through the angel Gabriel. In a society where oral tradition reigned supreme, the Quran had initially been memorized by many companions and recorded in fragments on diverse materials: parchment, bones, palm leaves. Yet, the fear that these sacred words might be lost or corrupted after the Prophet's death spurred Abu Bakr, at the urging of his close advisor Umar ibn al-Khattab, to commission a systematic collection of the Quranic revelations. Zayd ibn Thabit, the Prophet's scribe, was entrusted with gathering and verifying these verses from the memories of those who had been witnesses and reciters. This monumental task culminated in a single codex, ensuring that the Quran remained a unified and authoritative text that would serve as the spiritual and legal cornerstone of the emerging Islamic civilization. But the Quran was more than scripture. It was the foundation of a comprehensive moral vision and way of life. Its verses articulated a profound monotheism, emphasizing the oneness of God and calling humanity to justice, compassion, and humility. It introduced a new framework for worship, centered on the 5 daily prayers, fasting during Ramadan, almsgiving, and pilgrimage to Mecca, that fostered a shared identity and discipline among the faithful. These acts of devotion, combined with the ethical exhortations of the Quran, created a cohesive and dynamic community bound by faith and mutual responsibility. Alongside religious practice, the early Muslim community began to develop a complex legal and social order known as Sharia, derived from the Quran and the Prophet's sayings and actions. This emerging legal system addressed issues ranging from personal conduct and family law to commerce and governance, offering a blueprint for a just society that balanced individual rights with communal welfare. The caliphs and their advisors grappled with interpreting and applying these principles, setting precedents that would influence Islamic jurisprudence for centuries to come. The transformative power of early Islam extended beyond the spiritual and legal realms into the social fabric of Arabian society. The rigid tribal allegiances that had long defined the peninsula were gradually transcended by a new sense of brotherhood among believers, united not by blood but by faith. This shift fostered unprecedented levels of cooperation and solidarity, enabling the community to withstand external pressures and internal divisions alike. It also laid the groundwork for the expansive movement that would soon carry the message of Islam far beyond Arabia's deserts. Within a few decades of Muhammad's passing, the Caliphate embarked on a series of military and diplomatic campaigns that dramatically altered the political map of the Near East. While the Byzantine and Sasanian empires still loomed in the background, the swift and decisive conquests by the Muslim armies redefined the balance of power. These expansions were not merely acts of territorial ambition, they were deeply intertwined with the religious imperative to spread the message of Islam and to establish societies governed by its principles. Yet, the early caliphate was not a monolith. It was marked by vigorous debates over leadership, interpretation, and the nature of authority, debates that would eventually give rise to diverse schools of thought and sectarian traditions within Islam. These internal dynamics reflected the complexity of sustaining a rapidly growing and geographically diverse community, one that encompassed a multitude of cultures, languages, and histories. In this era of transition and growth, the legacy of early Islam was crystallized in a living tradition, one that preserved the words and example of the Prophet, nurtured a vibrant community of believers, and articulated a vision of justice, worship, and social order that continues to inspire millions around the world. The dawn of the Caliphate was not merely the succession of a political leader, it was the beginning of a civilization whose foundations rested on faith, memory, and the enduring human quest for meaning and unity.